All right. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Bubble Man's World, and welcome to another episode of Hash Church 2.0. I think we're at episode 9, but I kind of can't remember. I named most of them and then kind of forgot to name one. I called it the We're Back episode. But I think we're around episode 9, so thanks, everyone, for coming in and being here this morning. I'm kind of excited. It was a throw-together episode. I just kind of hit people up last night at the last minute and said, hey, we're doing an episode. If you want to come in, come on in. So let's do it. I'm going to send out the email. I'm going to send out the Facebook link. We'll see if we can't get a few with me right now. Although we do have 168 people who are already in the room. I guess some eager Hash Church aficionados have been waiting since last night. You guys have been holding down the chat. It's great to see everyone. Anthro, Slothy Heads, Jules, Bingo Lombardi, 70s Mama, BB Please, Woody, Deckman, Collie Cam, Jason Winowski, a whole group of cool people. I think Cuban's in there somewhere. I thought I saw the Skunk Man Hash in there at one point in time. Oh, holy smokes, what is hash? Good question. Hash, of course, is the glandular trichome paste definition of hash. I don't really define hash as being oil. I know a lot of people do, but I don't. Let's see if this link is working, because I've sent it out now. I'll send it out again. See if we can't make sure that's working. Get my panel in here, all alone with 232 people. That's a lot of talking just for one guy. See if that's going to work. Oh, Farmer Tom, how you doing, brother?
Pretty good, buddy. How you doing?
I'm doing really good, man. I'm doing really good. I'm kind of happy to just get together with you guys and shoot the shit this morning. I got to admit, CubanGrower's in the room as well. Oh, he popped in, he popped out. He'll be back. All right. You ready to get deep in it today?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. CubanGrower's back in the house. I think he's trying to figure out his cameras and whatnot. As we often do. Even myself this morning, when I kind of, I've done it so many times. It's like getting it all ready, starting it up, and then you send out the links and you're like, will it work? Is this going to work? Good to see you, Cuban.
Yo.
Okay. Yo. You got me thinking maybe I should be putting my headphones on just in case I create a little bit of a reverberation or backlash.
Yeah. I just am heavy into the PC gaming, and if you don't have a headset and a microphone, they'll yell at you. Dude,
forget about it. How can you even go in there? My son's all over that stuff, and it's you should go kill him one day on Fortnite.
Yeah. It's crazy. Everyone's playing that game, bro. It's made so much money.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah. But thank you for having me, man. I had to dig out my webcam. I remember I bought this thing back when Hash Church was kicking weekly, but I lived out in the woods and didn't have enough bandwidth to really take advantage of it, So whipped it out.
Yeah.
It's working well.
Well, thanks for coming, dude. It's always a pleasure to see you and hear about what you've been up to in the world. I saw some crazy video the other day where you were drifting in your car. I guess one of your passengers was recording the video. I was like, oh, snap. Cuban.
Yeah. That was fun, man. I mean, I try to do as much as I can to kind of keep my head out of the crazy cannabis industry out here in the States. So drifting is one way, to get out there and get in the zone. Kind of like when I make hash, I get in the zone too. Breeding dogs, I feel like that's another thing that's really been putting a lot of love in my heart,
That's awesome, dude. I could tell that you're doing things that bring you joy. So, I mean, just keep it up. That's generally when people are kind of on this internet thing. I see people looking for people who are really loving their lives. That's inspiration to people, where they're just like, oh man, like I just see you loving your life. You got your dogs, you got your car, you got your family, you got your hash and your herb, and it's why people gravitate towards you. I can promise you that it's not just because you've won countless amounts of awards for your hash, but because you have a passion for living, and the things that you do with a spark, and people are always going to be attracted to that.
Hell yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, all right. Look at that. Bridget's in the house. Oh, I mean Eric. Oh shit!
Yeah, we're
Oh, I do it for the Terps, dude. That is hilarious.
Yes, that's awesome.
So Eric and I spoke with each other this morning. We were like, "What hat are you wearing? What shirt are you wearing?" Actually, we absolutely did not speak this morning about what we were wearing. And I got to give a shout out to Josh for gifting this shirt right off of his back when I saw him in Whistler recently with the Dragon Crew. I do it for the Terps. This shirt.
That's awesome. I love this.
So it's kind of funny to be wearing. Dude, it's hilarious that you would come in with that shirt. That is classic. Welcome, dude. Good to see you, man.
Yeah, you too. It's good to see everybody. I'm
not surprised that you're kind of like potentially in some type of a hoop house outdoors somewhere.
Yeah, that's right. I got a couple little hoop houses on my property.
Oh, that's fucking solid. Dude, I want to say hello to Laughter Wade. I saw Wade. I know Wade is way back. I don't know if you guys remember the last time on and told us he had some bad back issues. How are you doing, brother? Oh, you're muted. That when you're laying all crippled up and then you're like, unmute yourself?
Not crippled.
There you
just slow this morning. But recognizing that because I've hurt my back, it makes a lot of sense not to sit. So I'm going to ask your forbearance to take our meeting this morning in bed. I got the same enthusiasm to offer opinion. But yeah, I've got an ice back and the healing is happening. It's just not the quickest experience. I'm an impatient guy.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I'm going to turn
hilarious.
my camera off because I don't know that everybody wants to watch my little bed scene. But yeah, that's a little slice of our farm out there. You can see the compost operation and whatnot.
We absolutely bed scene. Nice, dude. Well, I hope you're feeling better anyway, dude. I know that was a serious kick to you.
Yes, it was, Marcus. I wanted to thank you for, hey, yeah, Mark. I wanted to thank you, Marcus, for your gift to the Caladrius Network. Your hash washing device was one of the most hotly bid upon items at the auction. I don't know what it went for or who ended up with it, but I put in a couple of bids myself. Hello, Mark. Looks like Bubble Man dropped off. Hey, there he is again.
Hey, Wade, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Mark. I was taking this morning's meeting laying down. Very much appreciated the suggestions that you had on preparations. Mark and I had a chance to speak. Thank you, Marcus. And yeah. Anyway, good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Sorry about that, guys. I got bounced out for a second. In fact, it still shows my other account is in here. Not sure what happens. That was a little bit of a heart attack, but welcome, Dr. Scialdone. Hope you're doing well.
Hey, Marcus. Hey, everybody. How's everyone doing today? Everything's great here in the sunny state of Pennsylvania.
Nice. That's good to hear. I got to reduce my quality of my video here, so maybe I'm a little less choppy. People are saying I'm chopping up. There we go. Sounding better. Good stuff. And Skunkman Sam, I think I sent you the link. Where did you go, my brother? Where did you go? I could send it to his Facebook real quick, just in case he's getting it there. It's always a little bit of difficulty when we're trying to get things going here at first in the morning. Limited bandwidth. All right, we'll go on low, medium. I'm just excited to have a small group of you guys in here. Is everyone still in here? We're working. We got Tom and Cuban and Eric and Wade and Mark.
I could email the link to Sam if you want me to. You want me to?
Yeah, maybe send it to him just in case. I think he was in the room this morning, so I'm sure that he's popping by. I know the Dragonfly Earth Medicine was going to try, but they're in the middle of pulling down their crop right now. And who else? I guess I invited a bunch of different people this morning. There's Hemp Guy. What's going on, Sam?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, but your lips aren't moving.
Well, that's because I'm a ventriloquist.
Oh, you're a ventriloquist. Oh, right. I get it. One of them ventriloquists. Not sure why my camera is so like fast and I can't unzoom it. But you know what? We're going to deal with it. That's the way it is. I hope everyone's doing good. I hope things are nice in sort of sunny Amsterdam for you, Sam.
It's cloudy now.
Yeah, here too. We just the Pacific Northwest went into winter mode 48 hours ago. It was just like fire, 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 fire. Just so for those of you that don't know, my entire province is on fire right now. 600 fires that are affecting Washington and affecting Alberta and Saskatchewan, and the smoke is just unbelievable how many fires there are right now. It's a little bit disconcerting. I know there's a natural sort of way for this to go on and that things need to burn, and there's sort of a natural cycle in all of it, but it seems a little off right now. I know it happens to Cali every year too, just burn, 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 burn. And I'm sure all the way up the West Coast, but British Columbia is on fire. And if you look at the map, it's unbelievable, our fire map. There's just little fires covering the entire province. There was a couple days ago, there was really nowhere in the province that you weren't smoked out. It kind of created these Serengeti-like sunsets where the sun was just super orange and the sky was just very, very, I wouldn't say cloudy, but just super hazy and smoky, and definitely affecting people's, ability to breathe. People with sort of breathing disorders were a little bit more stressed out about it than the rest of us. But yeah, hope everyone's doing well out there from the fires from Cali on up to British Columbia. It was, it's a bummer. We're going to end up with a whole lot of chipotle weed. I'm not sure if you guys ever really recognize that herb that has that smoke damage to it that you just kind of can't seem to wash off. I'm sure potentially you could do short path molecular distillation. No-nos.
I find it's really handy to have weed like that because you don't even have to smoke it. It's already been smoked.
Yeah, it's already been smoked. It's kind of like from a hash maker's perspective, although I do appreciate your sick and sarcastic, twisted humor, Sam. I do love it. It hurts my soul. Like when I see people bring me beautiful bud and I'm like, oh man, that looks so, and then I crack it open and I'm just like, oh, it's the chipotle herb. It's just all, I mean, this has to be a major problem in California, Eric.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're not seeing everybody coming out with the smoked buds yet all the way, but I mean, there's smoke everywhere, so it's inevitable for that to happen. The labs are talking about what people can do to, try to save the stuff or make it usable in some regards, but it really just depends on where you are and how long that smoke sits. But I mean, most of Northern California, for the most part, has been really sitting in a really heavy fog of smoke. And it's cleared out a little bit here in the Grass Valley, Sierra Mountains to some degree where I am, but up in Humboldt and the Emerald Triangle and, I mean, Garberville and all these areas I've been lately, yesterday was pea soup. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's I mean, you just think of how much cannabis that's affecting. And it seems to have gotten worse in the last few years. I don't know if we're at some sort of a pinnacle in the cycle, but it definitely seems the last 2 to 3 years, both California and British Columbia are just endless stories of people being, escorted out of their neighborhoods burning to the ground. And obviously it's terrible when it's trees, but when you get into the house fires and you start burning all these plastics and wires and all these other things, the smoke contains toxicities that are at a completely different level than just smelling like smoke. Then you get this other thing going on. And I'm not sure. I mean, I guess the scientists would be able to speak a little bit more on that, but how do you clean that? How do you make that available
You could grow it in the greenhouse with a HEPA filter.
I mean, even like besides the weed, for example, yesterday I met up with a patient that she suffers from Lyme disease, and she has a very sensitive like a body overall. A lot of things affect her, but she told me she had multiple seizures because of the smoke. She lives in Lake County or I don't know, Lakeport. Yeah, it's by Mendocino, and her dad was showing me a video of like this enormous wall of fire. It must not have been like 3 miles from their city. It's crazy. And yeah, I mean, just like indirectly, without even a smoking cannabis, it can affect you if you have a compromised immune system, for sure.
That
Not to
fire
mention the small
you
microns of the ash that get deep into your lungs. If you're affected by the fires and you're in close proximity to the smoke, you should wear maybe a mask too. For sure. Sorry,
yeah,
I didn't mean to cut you off.
the fire that you're mentioning is the biggest fire in California history already, and it's only about 60% contained. It's pretty insane.
Yeah,
What's going on?
Everybody needs to grow, instead of fire, they need to grow fire extinguisher weed.
Yeah, or maybe it just needs to rain out here more often. I mean, I haven't seen rain since March, and it's hot, super dry out here. Supposedly that big fire in Mendocino, the one that you were mentioning, it got started by a truck driver's tire blowing out and the rim creating a spark and igniting like the countryside to the side of the road, or some crazy shit like that. That is like, that wouldn't start a fire anywhere else, but in California, when it's dry like that, yep. And not to mention Canada, man. Washington is all smoky. It's bad out there. A good friend of mine that he has 2 kids with SMA hasn't left the house in like 5 days because the air quality is that bad that it could affect his kids negatively. So it's a terrible impact.
Well, I'll give you an idea of how bad. Go ahead, Sam.
If you want to see rain, Cuban, come to Amsterdam. We'll have it for you for sure.
That's for sure. That is for sure. I'll tell you how bad it is. I saw Jodie Emery flew from Toronto to Vancouver recently, and she was basically like, usually I'm so stoked to get to Vancouver and breathe in the air quality from Toronto, and she said it was just, the air quality was so much worse than basically our biggest city in Canada. So that gives you an idea of just these fires are like deeply affecting people. I feel bad for people with asthma and emphysema and all these sort of different lung ailments, that bronchitis and whatnot, because they just get lit up when this happens. It just makes it like, 20, 30 times worse than it was. And you get, yeah, like Cuban was saying, you get these sinus infections and you get pain behind your eyes, and it's just, it's no bueno.
It makes it hard for summer vacation with the kids and stuff, because everybody's kind of got to be indoors or limited amount of play outside and things like that. So, I mean, it's been tough all the way around with this smoke, and I can't imagine what the people are going through that are in the fires and the people that are fighting the fires, things like that. I mean, it's been really hot, and those guys wear all kinds of gear, and there's been a lot of lives lost in these last few fires in Mendocino and the Redding one, and it's just surprising how, like you were saying earlier, it's not just forest fires, it's neighborhood fires and wiping out little areas and things that are completely new to all of us, and how to deal with it really, and how do we prepare for fire living in these fire-stricken areas, I guess you could say. And so I've been with a lot of people lately, and it's all like, get a trailer, park it out in front of your house, fill it with all the valuables in case there's a fire, then you hook up to this trailer and bail out. And I'm like, so every year we unpack our house and fill up a trailer and, you know, spend the summer with this like bug out trailer ready to go or something. And it's like, I hear all these different theories on how to deal with it. And I mean, I would say the one thing that I've noticed traveling to a lot of farms lately is that a lot of the farms aren't prepared for fires. They're prepared for permits and, you know, they're legal and don't get me wrong, they're beautiful farms and things. But if you really look around, you can kind of notice that nobody's prepared for an actual fire.
But
Yeah, we're seeing
back in the day.
We're seeing a lot of fires down in Southern Oregon too. We can't forget our friends down there in the Applegate and, you know, Williams and the Rogue Valley down there, just getting slammed again this summer. It hasn't ceased. One of my good friends, James House, was fighting a fire around his house the other day, and he was able to save it. So, but it's really scary for so many people. I've traveled into Northern Cal and down into Humboldt. It was really bad down there. And the further I got into Mendo, the worse it got. And then I was at Seattle Hemp Fest last weekend, and we could hardly breathe on Saturday. So,
yeah, and just to touch up on like fire preparation in let's say a light dep or outdoor permitted on a situation where you're outside in like more in the wilderness, you know, like Mendocino and etc. What can you really do to kind of deter the fire? If there's a huge fire your way, you know, hundreds of thousands of acres, can you even do anything?
Yeah, it travels at such an incredible speed. You know, it's definitely something that's going to be hard to prepare without really affecting your life in a major way, like, you know, removing trees all around your house and creating that sort of buffer zone. But when Eric was talking about slamming everything into a trailer, it really reminded me of back in the Prohibition days of how often we had to do that with our gardens. I mean, how many people here threw their whole indoor garden into a trailer while their landlord, you know, visited their property? I can't even count how many times I did that in my life, both helping friends and doing it for myself. You know, we got so confident at it towards the end, we'd leave the fucking truck parked in the driveway of the house. So the people would literally walk by the fucking thing, go into the house, be like, yeah, okay, everything looks good. Have a good day. Like, they're driving away and the truck doors getting opened up and be like, all right, let's get this shit back in there. It's kind of ridiculous. Also, shout out to all the firemen and the prisoners who have been fighting the fires down in Cali and up in Canada. And I guess we haven't really had a discussion since Loud Pack's greenhouse facility went up in smoke. That's a soul wrencher as well. Really sorry to hear about that for the Loud Pack family and the DNA genetics and all those guys that had things growing there. I heard all sorts of different numbers from, you know, $10 million upwards of $20 to $30 million. And whatever it was, I definitely want to give my, you know, shout out to those guys that, you know, keeping on. Absolutely devastating news, and sounds like one of those things that could have potentially have been, well, I mean, people ask how we can prevent things. Like sprinkler systems is a good idea right off the bat. Never a bad idea to have a sprinkler system, be able to soak everything down with water and get that fire out before it really starts. But sometimes these things are uncontrollable, and that Loud Pack fire was unbelievable. Yeah, prisoners fighting fires. I think down in Cali, they pull prisoners out to, I don't know, they don't pay them much, but they get out for the day or whatever, and they fight fires. So good on them. It's kind of like a better thing to be doing than sitting and rotting in prison anyway.
Yeah.
They get time off their sentences as well, Marcus.
I
would think they should. I mean, that's some serious life or death shit. You're really kind of like, you know, when I met these guys, we were smoking hash on the banks of the Ganges, and all sorts of different languages were being spoken. It was just an incredible experience from top to bottom. But one of the things I was intrigued by was the sort of like, there was a couple of guys, and I couldn't really put my finger on what their trip was, but they were the helpers of the babas. So they would make the chai tea, they would pack and clean chillums, they would make the campsite clean, they would sweep, they would make sure that everything was was kind of capiche with the Baba's campsites. They would prepare food. And I sort of asked the Baba Pashupati that you guys have maybe seen a picture of me with back in the day, back in the late 90s when I was in India. And he said that, these guys were people that had gotten caught stealing, and they had an alternative to going to prison. They could actually become like a helper for a Baba and follow this. These Babas have hard lives. They don't live an easy life. They sleep outside. Some of them own nothing. They walk everywhere they go. I mean, some take cars, some actually fly, but for the most part, a lot of them, depending on what sect they're from, whether they're from the Naga Babas or the Krishna Babas or the Shivite Babas, they live particularly different hard lives. And I guess in India, there's this these helpers instead of going to prison. And I thought it was a pretty cool thing where you just, what a great way to rehabilitate a criminal mind, because I'm pretty sure I might have a criminal mind when it comes to the law. At least with the cannabis prohibition over the years, definitely taught me to think a certain way. But I guess people that have, are getting in trouble a multitude of times have this opportunity to go and almost study under a sadhu and travel with him and learn about the spirituality and, learn about karma and all these different things. And I just thought it was a very kind of intriguing way of getting past, the pattern of committing crimes against.
Mark, you don't have a criminal mind. You have an outlaw mind.
Especially with unreasonable laws.
I do have an out, especially with unreasonable. I'll take that. I'll accept that. I appreciate that, Sam. That could have been the most twisted, crazy joke ever as he opened his mouth, but yet it was a compliment. At least I take that as a compliment. So Mark Scialdone sent me a link today. He said, hey, maybe we could talk about this. The article is called Why Patent Lawyers Are Watching This Colorado Cannabis Case. And I guess for those of you that don't know, we've got UCAN, good old Tony and Ernie's company, currently suing a Colorado company named Pure Hemp. And I guess it's for jacking their cannabis fat extraction. Is that what it's all about, Mark? Have you gone far into this case yet?
I guess what they claim is that the product that Pure Hemp sells infringes on their number one claim in that patent.
Right, but isn't their number one claim soaking cannabinoids into plant fat?
I think their number one claim is just a composition of cannabinoids and terpenes. That's a liquid. It says a liquid formulation of THCA greater than 95% plus terpenes. It's pretty broad
It doesn't
claim.
have to be THC. It can be any cannabinoid that's 95% and with terpenes, correct?
I think their number one claim, if I remember correctly, I'm not looking at the patent right now. I think it was, although wait a second, I can tell you what the patent number is because I have it up. It's the so-called 911 patent. It's US 9730911. It's interesting how it ends in 911. 911. Yeah, I think the number one claim in that patent is, if I remember correctly, is just somebody could look it up and make sure that this is right. It's just a composition that contains THCA greater than 95% plus terpenes to make it liquid. I think that's the number one claim in that patent. And they claim, I guess, from what I know, and I haven't seen, I have seen it. The document, Marcus, maybe you could post that link, because in that link, or in one of these links here, I'll send you this link. This is a different link, Marcus. If you could post this link, this would be really useful for people to see, because you could actually see the legal document that was filed in the court and read it, and you could see, like, I don't want to say anything because, again, tell Tony's a friend. And
you don't want to get sued.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to get sued.
More than just
He's a friend of Hash Church, right? I mean, and he talked about this, and he talked about wanting to have this as a a way to sort of, make sure that their intellectual property is protected. And UCAN's a publicly traded company. So if they are going to pursue a patent on something, you would only assume that if they pursue the patent and they pay the attorneys and they pay all the patent fees and they actually get an issued patent, that they're going to enforce it, or at least they're going to try to enforce it. So what can happen with this particular patent is, if somebody is being told that, well, you're infringing on our case, well, it's kind of like a way for UCAN to say, well, okay, well, maybe for your product, you should, buy a license to our patent. And it's a way to basically try to monetize the patent that Tony and UCAN has. And so, or the company could say, well, fuck, we don't want to license this. We've been selling this for years. We'll try to invalidate your patent. And then they'll go through the patent, and they'll go through the claims and everything and try to invalidate it. That's an expensive exercise too. To invalidate a patent costs hundreds of thousands of dollars because they got to go to court. It's just a big protracted battle. So something you probably don't want to do. You'd probably rather license it. And so
it's terrible.
Yeah, Tony,
it's horrible.
And Ernie and those guys are probably betting on the fact that companies will play the low risk road and license it as opposed to.
That's exactly what happened, Mark, with the people in Colorado that they were suing. They rolled and they licensed.
Right. Because licensing is a low risk opportunity. And if you think about it, maybe that's UCAN's value play here, is to try to put together as many of these licensing agreements that they possibly can. So people are basically just, paying them licensing revenues. And, how valuable that, as opposed to like my patent, for example, just as an example, I could talk about it because I know about it. In when we take THCA, which is what the plant makes, and we hydrogenate it, we make HHCA, and HHCA is a total new composition of matter that was never described in the chemical literature or never described in the patent literature. So right away, we rushed the patent at just because we wanted to make sure that other people didn't, right? So you could protect a new composition like that. Now, if you look at Tony's composition, their composition's a mixture of things. So it's really in a patent examiner's opinion that there's an inventable step there. There's like, again, I've used this example on Hash Church before. Edison, when he was looking for the filament, the incandescent light bulb, right? He was trying filament after filament after filament, should have given up after 152. He tries the 153rd time. It's a tungsten filament. The bulb stays lit. Aha, an invention. That's the invention.
For your information, the tungsten filament was not invented by Edison. He stole it from one of his employees.
Whatever. The analogy still stands, man. I don't even know if it's 152 or 252. It doesn't make a difference. The point is that you can't predict an invention from what's prior art, what's already known. So if it's already known that THC and cannabinoids and terpenes can be provided in a formulation to give a certain effect, you could argue again that there's a certain obviousness that they have to be able to overcome. Like, what was the aha moment of that invention? Like, was there a certain combination of terpenes and a certain ratio of cannabinoids? I don't know. It becomes difficult to really say where the inventive step is. Now, like, again, with just to contrast it, now again, I'm not trying to throw sand at this. With our compound, we were the first ones to make it. We don't know what it's good for, but because we're the first to make it, we have to patent it because it's a new composition. Tony's patent is around existing compositions. So when you take existing compositions and do new things to them, you have to do something that's completely new and unexpected. And that unexpected result, like you try 50 combinations and it doesn't work, but that 51st combination works, that's an invention, right? That's something that you have to protect because the prior art, everything that's known to that point tells you that 51st thing won't work. But you find some synergistic combination that you wouldn't able to be predicted from what's already known. So that's really important in patent law, is having something that, you know, I mean, again, yeah, everything's kind of known to a certain level. Like, people know that you can make new cannabinoids and they have certain biological activity, but certainly when you're making new compositions and new structures that have never been made before, which is what I've been doing, that's where it really becomes just a complete all-out exploration, because you could take existing ingredients and existing terpenes and existing cannabinoids, combine them in a certain way, and maybe find some, you know, off the scale combination that, you know, all the other combinations don't work, but this one combination, for whatever the effect that you're looking for, is it gives you some unexpected activity. That's the thing you want to patent, because you couldn't predict that from everything else. God, I sound like a broken record, but
that sounds a lot more complex than just like saying, oh, we put terpenes and cannabinoids into a plant fat mixture, which people have been doing for a very long time, and patenting that.
Right. And so, like, what Pure Hemp will do, or any potential infringer of Tony's patent can do, is look at the literature, find those examples, and bring those examples to the examiner to try to invalidate the patent. Again, that's expensive, and
I'm familiar. Trust me.
It creates a bad vibe too. Right?
Spend several $100,000 or $1 million doing so, fighting the patent.
Yeah, but you know, like, people who like put their life savings into their idea,
but here's
trying to bring it to market. I mean, you think about it, some of these people are hanging on to dear life, just trying to maintain the exclusivity that their patent provides to them, you know?
Well, thing, and how I really chose to deal with that is that when you have someone like you can with a patent like this, they're going to start attacking infringers. And what the infringers need to do is they need to gather together and create, like, so they're all sharing one lawyer and they make one case. And once they attacking five or six or seven or eight people, and those 5 or 6 or 7 together and fight back independently, well, now they're only paying 1/8 of the court fee normally otherwise pay, and you get a lot more strength. So I'm not trying to tell everyone how they should fight cases, but he just dealt when I ended up in court against water extraction patent. I ended up the patent, and I worked it out with Ryan really well, and I'm glad that it. But at the same time, if you don't feel the patent is valid and you really, you know, want to fight it and have that previously published knowledge, doing it as a group with other people who are being infringed is definitely the way to go about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because as you point out, the legal costs are tremendous, but also just the negative burden, or the burden of all this negativity. You know, when you go after people in a court, and you're filing motions against each other, you tend to get, you know, things tend to get a little bit nasty. But you got to also remember that, like, if you can licenses that patent to a company, so let's say a company gets together with Tony and they actually get a license for it. Now that company that's paying that licensing fee, they need UCAN to crack down on infringers, right? Because they're paying the licensing fee. They expect to have some exclusivity around that technology. And that's the way patents work, is that you're patenting and licensing basically something that gives another party the freedom to operate and the freedom to basically make that, knowing that, again, the people who hold the intellectual property are getting some kind of licensing revenue from that. You know, typically in the chemical industry or in the food industry, not pharmaceuticals, anything but pharmaceuticals, those licensing revenues are anywhere between 2 to 5 to 7, sometimes percent in perpetuity. So when you license a technology to a commercial organization that then takes that and commercializes it, the owner of that IP should expect to see somewhere between about 5, 6, 7% of that revenue, that gross revenue, come back to you in a licensing agreement. Typically, you have there's milestone payments when you go to license a technology and you enter into a memorandum of understanding and an LOI typically are usually the way those things get started, but ultimately there's licensing fees that are paid. And yeah, those companies that basically now buy those licenses need the enforcement of that intellectual property over these so-called infringers. So it can breed a lot of negativity in the industry, because if you think about it, there's a lot of people selling, terpene concentrates, right? And so it's hard to think, who's not infringing on this patent, right? I mean, let's be frank. So that's just another thing. I'm not throwing sand on the patent. I'm not saying anything that's legally binding here. Just giving you my opinion as an expert in the field of patenting.
So how much is the licensing for the hydrogenated THCA? I want one.
And you want a license? We'll cut you a goodbye discount.
I'm jacking it. I want to see Mark sue me.
No, we're going to do the right thing.
Don't worry, you will work together against Mark. That way we can split the fees.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing the right thing with HHCA. We're going to be doing preclinical testing starting this month, actually, unfortunately in animals, but also in human cellular testing models, where we're going to look at the anti-cancer property of hydrogenated cannabinoids. And we do believe a quick and easy route to market is a topically applied cream or salve for the treatment of skin cancer, because you have a direct delivery of the cannabinoids right into the cancerous tumor. You don't have to go through a pill in the gut and the liver and everything that comes with taking a pill or some type of oral medication. We're going to go after, sort of like the Rick Simpson notion of, hey, apply cannabis oil to skin tumors and they go away. Well, we're going to put a value proposition to that and basically take hydrogenated cannabinoids into those formulations, because we think they'll have good activity doing that. And, it's just an easy way to basically take something that's obviously a tumor and, treat it directly with infusion of cannabinoids right into the tumor itself, which is just a godsend for drug delivery. If you're trying to take a pill and get a systemic delivery of cannabinoids to somewhere that has cancer in your body, that's a real tough boulder to push up a hill. But direct treatment of tumors with cannabinoids could essentially be a good payoff.
Well, cannabis survived prohibition. Let's hope it can survive corporate douchebaggery.
It will, because the plant is ubiquitous. I mean, it's here. It's already been here. I mean, it's so funny because you see this happening here in the States, and I'm sure it's happening with legalization in Canada. Big money is getting in, and where big money gets in, that's where patents and exclusive licensing and branding and all that stuff plays a really big role.
Big money has come in. We used to think it was big money when Tilray and Privateer and Tweed Canopy were raising $100 $4 billion US raise for Canada. $4 billion US. That's $5 billion got raised in the cannabis industry from Coronation, the company that owns Corona beer.
Mm-hmm.
That's the largest raise I've ever heard of in my life. Has anyone else heard of anything larger than that?
No, that's it.
That's the one, huh?
That's it. And a distressed license in Florida, a medical license. They're about to go recreational, but they're about to issue a bunch more medical license. But a distressed license in Florida recently closed at $59 million. So this is probably a license that probably cost, I don't know, maybe $1 or $2 million to put together, and they're selling it for $59 million. I mean, that's pretty substantial. It turned out that when they put the law in Florida in place, you had to be grandfathered in as somebody who has been in the agricultural industry, either, you know, growing perennials or shrubs or vegetables or whatever. And we all know that, you know, just because you can grow, you know, arborvitae and you know, roses, that doesn't mean you can grow cannabis. And so this was one of those examples of a business that basically got into the industry that never should have been in to begin with, fail, and then some multinational comes in and basically scoops them up at an incredible, you know, upside.
Sorry, I'm just trying to close some programs. Like, people are saying that they're not hearing me very well, that I'm breaking up like a robot, which is
You sound great, Marcus. Sound very clear and fine.
I'm
He's breaking up.
Yeah, it's breaking up on my end too.
yeah, I don't know what's going on. It's a bummer. It means I can't really share. I guess it doesn't help when we cut each other off too.
John Page also recently sold an India for 122 Canadian dollars.
Which is a third of what Haiku just sold their brand that has 2 coffee shops to Canopy for. What, $350 million for a brand. Pretty insane. Well, I'm probably going to stop talking. So if you guys want to keep the conversation going, if I'm a robot, there's no point for me to talk, really.
No, you're only breaking up sometimes, Marcus.
Well, I'm reading the chat. It sounds like it's a lot.
No, you're fine.
Maybe it'll record better anyway. So sometimes that happens. The bandwidth just squishes out, but once it's recorded, people will be able to kind of go back and listen and watch. So
You sound fine now. I think it was earlier, and it's probably just your Wi-Fi, right?
Well, I think it's important that we all keep our mics muted as well. How much is Bubbleman brand worth? I don't know, man. I really don't know. I'm having a hard time in this whole thing with this just giant corporate structure that's occurring with, you know, the different. It's a changing game in cannabis. You see it, and I'm not necessarily overly against it. I mean, I kind of see how cannabis is just it's doing what we wanted it to do. We're plugging it into every other aspect of agricultural products, and so you know, like, these things are occurring in every other aspect of life. I see people complain about cannabis constantly, but I know they're still supporting every other industry and every other aspect of their life, from where they buy their vehicles, their computers, their clothes, their food, you know, the beer they drink, like literally everything. But they, you know, they're all like, but we got to buy craft cannabis. It's like, well, but you don't really do that in regards to everything else. Like, it's just an interesting switch to see how many people truly will support craft cannabis and how many people will end up, you know, purchasing Coors Light. I think Coors Light does more sales than the IPA.
It's coming up with all the testing now too, because a lot of people are really concerned about how clean cannabis can be, but yet our food has a lot of allowable limits. And I'm not trying to advocate dirty cannabis by any means, but you know, I did a panel with some people that were from testing labs or lab, you know, companies. And one of the things they said was, what is the metric for zero? Like, what is clean? If everybody's like, you know, if every bit of wine is contaminated with glyphosate and kids are peeing Roundup the same, and it's, you know, basically they're saying everything is contaminated to a certain degree. And so how do we start with zero for cannabis and go from there? Because if everything else is contaminated, they have a tough time creating that zero metric, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, especially in the Salinas Valley.
It may be impossible. I don't know if you guys all saw this, but sea salt, it turns out, has microplastic in it. No more sea salt, folks.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. I mean, a lot of people aren't passing tests right now since they kicked up the new testing on July 1st for California. And so it's been a little bit tough getting everything organized. I went to Oakland right after July 1st, and everybody in Oakland was freaking out because there was no flowers on the shelves. I mean, Harborside, from what I heard, and various dispensaries in Oakland didn't have any flowers because after July 1st, the packaging and the testing kind of wiped everything out. And so it's definitely going to be an interesting time here for all the labs and what we're dealing with now for getting all this product out there.
Yeah, definitely, man. I mean, even touching up on that, I was down in LA 3 weeks ago to see some potential lab space, and I was at a friend's shop at AHHS in Hollywood, or whatever that area is called particularly. But anyways, that shop used to have like every single uh, like good produced product in the medical side of things years ago. If you had seen some good melt from whatever your favorite producer was, you could find it there, you know? And I was there and I wanted to see what adult use looked like because I had never stepped into a. I hope you guys can hear me well. Sorry, I had never stepped into a recreational store in California. So since I was in there in the back room, I was like, let me check out your shop. And the shelves were so empty, man. I mean, there was one hash brand, 710 Labs, no one else. I was looking for topicals. I personally like Carter's aromatherapy design, and he's not on the adult use either. It was like 90% of everything that was on the shelf was brands that I had never heard of before. Very nice marketing and presentation. Obviously, they got their shit together that they can get their product on a regulated shelf, but I only recognized 10% of people from the medical days. So I asked Jason about it. I was like, what percentage of the old cannabis industry do you expect to be fully regulated? Let's say like 2 years from now, when everything stabilizes, who do you think will be the players? He's like, oh, it's only going to be about 10%. 90% is going to be everyone else that had a good game plan, that had a goal and they worked together to achieve that goal, and everyone else was taking advantage of how easy it was to be in the open market. And that rattled me, man, because it's so hard to be uh in the adult use California market. It's like crazy
It's
hard.
almost impossible. I mean, to do it straight legal and do it on your own and not have investors or any of these kind of things, or not try to create little side doors, I guess. And, it's really tough. And I just went to Garberville Thursday night, and they had what was called a community outcry meeting in Southern Humboldt. And I mean, it was 3 hours of people getting up at the mic, pretty much, explaining how difficult everything is, not even on the state level, but just on the county level application process, because there was people that, the county's saying, and the permitting people are saying how easy it is. They'll help you. They'll walk you through it. It's just, a process. And then there's people that got up and said, look, I got a, master's degree. I'm a lawyer, this, that, and the other. And we couldn't get through your application process. And then people end up paying a consultant of some kind to spend a lot of money, it sounds like to me, to get through the application process, only to get denied because something got screwed up or whatever, or didn't get filled out properly. So, I mean, 40% less cannabis is planted in Humboldt County alone, not the Emerald Triangle, just Humboldt County. 40% less cannabis has been planted this year on the permitted side of things. And they just had a bust, actually, of an unpermitted garden. When I was up there on Wednesday, it was 20,211 plants, 65 pounds of pre-rolls, like 90 pounds of vape cartridges. I mean, it was insane. And there's plenty of them like that up there. It really kind of divided everything in a weird way, I guess you could say.
So what we've seen up here in Washington is the same thing you're going to see in California. We lost like 90% of the medical growers didn't make it. And now that legalization happened, 70% of the people who signed up are no longer in business. Plus, it's happening now in Oregon, and you're going to see the same thing in California. These communities have just been devastated. Like the whole Southern Oregon region has totally been devastated. I think there's only like 90% of the medical growers don't grow down there anymore. The prices are hitting rock bottom for everybody. And from what I hear in California, when you're taking money now, they're averaging out $100 a pound. So when you're borrowing money or you're going into some deal with somebody, the rate is going to be $100 a pound. So that's how can anybody turn a light on for $100 a pound is my question.
There you go. That's exactly it. And a lot of the guys like in the chat, they're talking about, you know, support black market and this and that. But let me tell you when that model also would fail theoretically, because it's the reality check that I got. It costs me. I grow indoors. It's my personal view on things. It costs me about $400 to $450 to produce a good unit. If I get 3 pounds per light, it might go down a little bit, but I have to pay for permits, rent, employees, everything. Right? I gotta calculate that into that price per pound. So I'm making these concentrates off this very expensive pound, right? But what if someone comes around and they're also regulated, and they say, hey, look, let's make a contract. I'll grow the same quality. You give me your strains, I'll grow you an acre, and I'll charge you $200 a pound or $150 a pound. And at that point, you can make a similar quality concentrate, bring your price down to where it's on the shelf for $40 maybe per gram or something less like that, instead of having to put it on there for 100. And at that point, growing weed is not even, it doesn't even make sense indoors anymore, unless you're growing for flowers. Now, there's always going to be companies that grow craft cannabis, right? That have a loyal following. But when I'm talking about like scaling, like seeing a product in available for 21 and over all across the state, or let's say all across the country, to where you won't have to go black market because maybe the same quality's there, tested, clean, you know, etc. That's when black market probably doesn't work anymore, in my opinion. You know, and that's where this thing is going, and it's sad, but it's true though. You know, so what I've been faced with is that if I try to focus on black market, I'm just gonna get swallowed up by the legal market. But I've had a lot of difficulty getting into the legal market. So I think what I want to do is consult. I feel like that I can help companies produce the product and not have to go through like the loops of getting my own, or the hoops of getting my own permit.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah, I mean,
Consulting is a good way, because what you're doing is you're lending your expertise to a client who basically is bearing the financial risk. And, you know, at this point, again, your expertise is none other. I mean, Cuban, if I could say so myself, I mean, you bring a unique a product to market that people will definitely want to pay consulting fees for to distinguish their product. But I want to go back to something you had just said, so the moment's not lost on this, is that one thing you have to consider when you go from, say, like a 10 lighter to a 10 acre is the scaling of your workforce. And ultimately, you're talking about no longer, you know, just growing cannabis. You're talking about managing a workforce, which is a whole burden unto itself, because, you know, again, there's a lot of different crazy characters out here, and going through the resumes and going through the background checks and getting people who are compliant in a legal market is one bucket of people. There's a lot of people, because they have dings on their record, who are not compliant. And that often creates, again, a, you know, separation in those who can work in a legal regulated industry and those who can't. But that cost, so at the end of the day, and commoditization, you see this in, regardless of whether it's cannabis or any commodity, is the guy who can produce at the lowest cost and still produce a high quality product. And how does he do that? He gets you to consult. He gets you to consult at his large grow, where now he can use your expertise to make a high quality product at that volume, employing that workforce, insuring those people, running the background checks for those people, and really creating a whole economy unto itself. If you know what I'm trying to say. I don't know if you dig what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, like being an IP holding almost, and being able to, I don't know, I see it in two different ways. You can help produce the product for them, you know, in the sense that they put up the money, throw up the lab, go through all of that, and you go in there and private label it for them. But or you could do also like consulting. Just go in there. They have their crew, instead of having to assemble a crew. They have their own crew, and kind of optimize the square footage of that lab space as much as possible, so they actually make good money and have a product that's marketable for them, you know. But a lot of these guys that are growing acres, I think it's a lot harder for someone that's, let's say, in the prohibition. Outdoor guys have it better because they scaled pretty big, you know. But indoor, the scaling was small. So when you're trying to get somebody that's like, yeah, I grow good weed, and you try to make them scale, a lot of times, it's not the same as somebody that may have a degree in agriculture or whatever. You know, it's dude that has a team with a bunch of money, you know, and they come with a plan ready to grow multiple acres, you know, successfully. Like they hit the books, they theoretically believe in what they're doing. And I think that transition going from craft to that big scale takes a lot of knowledge, man. It takes a lot of help, a team. It's tough. It's very tough.
And a long runway.
Yeah, it's insane, bro.
You need serious investments to create a long enough runway to get a company like that to take off properly, because so many companies just don't understand the actual investment that needs to be made to create some of these labs.
Large walk-in freezer.
Oh yeah, dude, I'm waiting for Mike to come in, Mike West, but I have sort of a little project that I'm working on here in Canada on the West Coast that I wanted to share with you guys. But I'll wait for Mike to come in before we talk about it, because he drove up from Spokane 2 days ago to come do a walkthrough of the facility to check it out. Much what you were speaking in regards to consulting. I'm all about like pulling sort of the best people that I know from my community to put these projects together. And I know for myself that my expertise is very limited with mechanical screen separations, water extraction, and but people have different types of extractions. So we're gonna keep that in, and we'll be smoking that in a little. I've seen everyone puff and tough. Maybe we should have a little, like maybe if D420K was in the room, he'd say bong rip, and we'd all hit a little rip. You guys down? Tom's down.
Well, all I can say for everybody is we got to diversify. All of us that have been in this industry for so long and kind of created it, and you know, we gave them the platform from which to grow. It's time for us to really diversify and, you know, be as flexible as possible if we're going to survive this whole transition into this corporate mess that we're headed into. It's a downhill slide. It's a race to the bottom, like we've seen here in Washington and Oregon. The same thing's going to happen in California. All these poor farmers up there in the Golden Triangle are going to the Emerald Triangle are really going to suffer big time. Well, you know, it's going to be horrible. How many of these mega facilities are there in California? I'm counting like 8 to 10 of them, you know, so it's really going to be, the price is just going to hit the bottom, and we all just got to diversify and come up with different kind of game plans, and which, so we can stay in the game and so we can take care of our families and our communities.
Absolutely. I think the beautiful thing about cannabis is it's the most adaptable plant. So if we can't adapt with it, then there's something wrong. And at the same time, you know, I want people to be able to make their living off of cannabis. But on the flip side of things, like $3,000 and $4,000 and $5,000 pounds was obscene, and it was based not on the magicalness of the plant. It was based on people doing 10 years in prison in Alabama and Oklahoma and Texas and all these fucking states. And that's where those prices came from. So those were the way they came to be. The prices just weren't an accurate description of reality. They were a description of prohibition, and to get rid of prohibition got rid of those prices. And it's true. It's, you know, Sam's been saying it for years. We could grow this stuff way cheaper and make it very affordable for pennies on the dollar kind of thing compared to these. I mean, my God, $5,000 pounds. Holy smokes.
I honestly have been saying for decades that the industry will end up in the hands of people like the organic vegetable growers or the organic flower growers, like for the cut flower industry. It's even in Holland, they barely have a cut flower industry anymore. Even in many countries in the last decade, They moved them all to tropical countries, Malaysia, Kenya, countries like that. That's where all the cut flowers are produced. Most of them are not organic, but it can be done organically too. And these are professional agronomists, and I guarantee you they can grow cheaper than you can.
Yeah, but does the repeal of alcohol prohibition offer any insight to what may happen in the repeal of cannabis prohibition? So if like the repeal of alcohol prohibition, and again, not all counties in the US serve alcohol. There are still dry counties that abide by prohibition of alcohol. But as alcohol prohibition was repealed, and if you think about it, in the 50s and 60s, we were drinking beers from multinational beer corporations, and ultimately there became a craft beer industry, microbrews, and people are really into flavored scotches now and authentic, really, artisan level, alcohol. Could the same kind of thing be like a reflection of what's going to happen with cannabis, which is that, yeah, there will be some mass produced bullshit that you can buy in Walmart, but hopefully still at, somewhere close by to where you live, you'll be able to buy a craft cannabis product, be it a concentrate or flower, and it's made just the way that it was when it was grown in the black market days, and it's still good, and it's still really dank, and it's not suffered on quality, and it's basically maybe paying a little bit more than you're going to pay in 7-Eleven for pre-rolls, but you're paying the farmer who needs to coop his investment and have a livelihood to be able to produce that product for you.
I think it's likely, Mark. I think the only problem is that it's niche, and it's going to be a lot fewer people than the people that are, if it's musical chairs, a lot of people are going to be left standing without a chair because it's just not the same way as it was. And although 7-Eleven is a good analogy, I think the real low quality is going to be served up at the gas stations. You get into the gas stations, go get some pre-rolled herb. That's going to be.
And the president of Maryland tells you that the best fried chicken is at the Royal Farms, which is a gas station. So, gas stations are now these mega complexes that serve food, caffeine, gasoline, sugar, fats, and everything that we need as humans to basically keep our cars and ourselves going. They also have bathrooms if you need to do that. So, yeah, I mean, those mega gasoline station complexes which seem to be invading our country. I don't know if they're like that up in Canada, but certainly these places like Wawa or Royal Farms. So yeah, you can get really good fried chicken.
We just we're pretty chill, We just got the one road goes from the west to the east, and I think there's the odds, and not many though. It's more of a rarity.
Does anybody have an idea how much what's the cheapest price you can produce the highest quality cannabis for? I know by the kilogram because I've done it for decades on multi-acre facilities.
Yeah, so share that information with us because there's definitely, you're the one who knows the answer.
About 100 euros a kilo unmanicured. Hand manicuring was the most expensive cost.
Wow. That's pretty good, considering that herb he's talking about it's shockingly strong and like shockingly good. That's what I will say about that to this day.
Organically grown.
I've been trying to look at a lot of those numbers or go back and forth with people about that, and I'm finding the indoors up to $545 a pound on the hydro, general hydroponics type of method. And then when we get into the no-till organic or even, outdoor growers for that matter, it varies so much because one of the things that's happening is that everybody's dealing with disease and they got to pass these tests, and the root aphids are taking everybody by storm. And it's just insane the level of battle that people are paying for in order to try to make their plants A, make it to the end, and B, pass the test. And so it's not even the cost of production, I feel like, in some ways, even though that's what we would call it. It's the cost of like
loss.
Yeah, it's and so there's a lot of break even out there. There's a lot of people that are not knowing what to do anymore. And the funny thing is, or, you know, the sad part about it is a lot of people were trying new things, and now they're going back to the old ways, and the old ways don't work like they used to either. And so there's a lot of like throwing the hands in the air because we started going with the new methods and that wasn't really serving them right. So they jump back to the old methods, and then those blow apart too. So, I mean, it's been really tough out there. And I've been going around since I left Forever Flowering, to a lot of farms doing some assessments and some management type things, and a lot of rescue is what I call it, greenhouse and farm rescue to a degree, because like I said, so many people are throwing their hands up, and not everybody also is at their farms. The owners of these farms own several farms, and they can't be in one place every time, or, you know, they don't have the SOPs set up either for their crew necessarily. So, I mean, we find a lot of people do so many different things, like 10 different things on, you know, one road for 10 different farmers, and nobody has any type of, you know, here's what I'm doing, but then that person does it a little bit differently. And so it's kind of confusing out there.
Diseases of cannabis or pests of cannabis?
Say that again?
Diseases or pests?
It comes with both. The places people are buying their clones right now are having several viruses as well as pests. So if you get clones from a nursery that's a permitted nursery, and you just get spider mites, you're pretty lucky, or you're stoked. But I mean, there's several nurseries right now that are licensed that are going through several lawsuits right now because they all made claims to a degree on their selling points, and then they sell a lot of people disease and viruses and things like this. But then when people get these problems, they actually do things to eradicate it, to combat or make the problems even worse.
So this is an interesting conversation, because we're talking about the growing of cannabis blowing up so big that it's turning into this corporate thing, and how are we going to keep from getting cut off? Now, on the flip side of that, and this is kind of interesting, we have cannabis, the only clonally produced plant that's in the numbers that is not using tissue culture to grow the plantlets. Now, tissue culture is going to remove the pathogens, the fungi, the microbials, the intercellular bacterias. It's going to renew vigor. It's going to produce equal, perfect plants that, you know, you can do acclimation from the plantlets into a small clone in a room that's designed specifically for the type of grow that you're putting those plants into, whether it's field grown, greenhouse, or indoor. And this isn't available in cannabis because that's really only available when you get to a certain level of commercial production. And that's where all the other plants, all of them, figured out that we need tissue culture to continue this on the level that we're continuing if we're going to grow without being destroyed, because these pests, these bacteria, these fungi, these diseases and viruses can actually decimate your crop to the level of like millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. And the nurseries are responsible, because I don't care how good of a grower you are, if you're buying plants that are impregnated with pathogens, fungi, and microbials, you are already working like one arm tied behind your back and one leg tied behind your back. How the fuck are you supposed to produce great cannabis when you've been given a terrible starting product? And so cannabis tissue culture really, at this point, sure, there's companies that can clean the plant up, and that's called initiation. It takes about 6 months, where you're removing all the bacteria, fungi, pathogens, intercellular bacteria. All of that is getting taken out of the plant, and now you have this perfect plant that's now healthy and ready to go and ready to micropropagate clone. As well as from the tissue culture company that I've spoken about a few times. These guys have it down. They have an incredible tissue culture scientist, and they're starting to make it available for the cannabis community. They're going to make available these clean cultivars, and not only that, but also working out deals with breeders where they can kind of get royalties on their plants, which once again, this is going to get people in an uproar, but this is how it works in bananas and almonds and blueberries and raspberries and basically every other plant that's micro-propagated. You get to strawberries, of course. It's everyone. Like it gets to a point where if you want to grow on, I mean, Driscoll's alone, to mention strawberries, which Ian often does, and that's where I heard this, they do 10 billion plantlets worldwide a year. Almost 2 billion plants. And they take them and they load them up with carbohydrates and they put them in these aseptic styrofoam boxes that fit 10,000 of these plantlets with bare roots. So you can take them and acclimate them yourself into clones. They don't photosynthesize. So you have about 72 hours where you can send this thing in the pitch black. And because they're preloaded with carbohydrates and they've never photosynthesized, they don't actually go into flower. It doesn't convince the plant or trick the plant. And as we know from Sam talking about it, one of his awesome tips that he gave was in regards to pre-flowering plants to check them for sex. And he would just do it for like a day or some hours, Sam?
It depends if it's an indica or a sativa or wide leaf or narrow leaf, as I say.
All right.
With longer flowering narrow leaf varieties, you might have to do it for 2, maybe even 3 days for really late maturing, induction ones. Whereas with really early ones, 1 day, all it took.
Yeah, so both of those fail when it comes to sending things in the pitch black in the mail. If you're sending clones, you're gonna confuse them and start off a process that you really don't want to start off on a plantlet that small. And that's just one more reason tissue culture is going to be a huge save for the cannabis industry. I think it's going to help drive the prices down while still allowing people who want to produce large-scale grows to actually get the job done, because diseases and pests will, I mean, any farmer knows.
And as far as I know, Segra, they are exploring this, but they have not developed a protocol to identify all of the cannabis viruses and to eliminate them yet. They're in the process.
Excellent point. So when it comes to tissue culture, one of the most important things is that tissue culture companies need to also have microbiology labs. Those labs have to be, cutting edge and on point is on point is on point. And the most important thing, which is one of the things Segra actually did, is they validated their microbiology lab before they did anything in it. So they took a plant like hops, which has had tens of millions of dollars spent on it to genetically fingerprint it, and they validated their procedures in that lab with hops rather than trying to do it with cannabis, which really has no genetic fingerprint. That job hasn't really been done to the degree of hops, I can promise you that. And so validation of the microbiology lab is extremely important. And then also the SOP that you run in that microbiology lab. And Segra has an exceptional microbiologist, Dr. John Brunstein, who I think ran like the Canadian hospital microbiology labs here for a decade or more. The guy definitely knows what he's doing. And it's kind of the flip side of that coin where, we get to a point where we're growing and growing and growing. And everyone wants a big grow. I used to grow cannabis. I haven't for a while, but I started with a light and it grew to 5 to 10 to 20. And you know how it goes. It grows as big as you can make it happen. And so the first time I was ever in a large garden where people were like, oh, fuck those corporate gardens or whatever, I came out of it going, no way, man. Like, I think we should probably get the people who are feeling ousted that they're not able to grow their powdery mildew bud in a garage anymore or whatever, and get them into like a larger, some of these larger facilities that aren't necessarily huge canopies. A lot of the rooms are 1,000 square foot or 1,200 to 1,500 square foot. And I've met some exceptional people from the black market at these large scale licensed production facilities, and they're kind of living their dream. They're able to grow cannabis every day. They're working with a team of people that grow cannabis. And sure, I think much the way Mark Scialdone mentioned with alcohol prohibition, that it's inevitably likely that we will find ourselves, hopefully really in the least in a place like with alcohol where it can be advertised, where it's available everywhere. I mean, to me, alcohol is dangerous. It's not a safe drug. It has an LD50. It can kill you. It's dangerous for children. It affects your mind. It affects your liver. It's a huge social tear, in my opinion. tears on the social fabric of our communities. Now, I'm jaded because I grew up in an incubator of alcoholics, not my family, but the community that I grew up in was just like, woo, let's just drink as much as we can. So it turned me off of alcohol in a big way. But I think prohibition, sorry, Sam, let me just finish my thought. I think prohibition is going to be much like when it ended with alcohol. Remember, for close to 20 years when alcohol prohibition ended, you could not have a sign in your window that said beer. Long way today. I hope it doesn't take 20 years, but here in Canada, we have legal medical cannabis. The packaging has to be like blank. It's the most boring package. You can be directed at children, which basically means you can't have shikes or characters or anything that definitely, the cannabis industry would shine in regards to its marketing portfolio if we could actually market everyone's products the way we should be able to market, with the clear knowledge that we're not trying to market to children. I mean, look at all the characters in here. Cuban and Tom and Skunk Man Sam, for God's sakes. I'm Bubble Man. Like, we all have like characters that could be caricatured almost into a brand that is considered here in Canada, at least, like, that's marketing to children. You're trying to market to children. They're so worried about children when it comes to cannabis that they don't seem to care that they're popping oxycontin. That's my rant.
And my trouble is I have short-term memory loss. So I was going to say something really, really, really important, but I don't know what the fuck it was.
Well, I cut you off. I'm sorry, dude. I wanted to welcome
that's all right. You were correct, actually. I was not correct, but there's a reason for my stupidity.
You know what, dude? On your worst day, you're a pretty smart guy, so I appreciate you. I'll just say that much. And I want to welcome Mike West to the room. What's going on, Mike? Mike's like, my mic's not working. That's a bummer when your name's Mike and your mic doesn't work. That's something else.
Can't sing Mike's song.
Mike's song. Mike's song was, do you know I saw Mike's song in 1993 at the Commodore Ballroom, standing right in front of Mike with no knowledge of the song whatsoever. It was the dark, dismal, dark Mike song days where it was like they would do the 10 to 15 minutes of strobe lights, jumping on the tramp, like just complete and total madness. I mean, honestly,
right? The smoke. They had the Minkin hangings, right? Didn't they have these wall hangings?
Absolutely, the mandalas, 100%.
Yeah,
and the old wooden speakers.
Yeah.
So just to jump us over to a world of fish right now. That was the first time I got denied to go see the Grateful Dead in Shoreline, Jerry Band shows in Seattle, Grateful Dead in Portland. It was like 93. And I basically drove out west instead and accidentally saw Fish at the Commodore Ballroom, which has a floor that's pushed down on radial tires. So it bounces. It's infamously known throughout Canada as the bouncing dance floor. And so they, of course, did Bouncing Around the Room because they heard about our floor, and they play that song often anyway. It was fucking awesome.
I think I remembered, which is that besides having companies like Segra clean up your plants, the other thing that needs to be done is cannabis has not really been bred to be mildew resistant, botrytis resistant. I mean, there has not been serious breeding towards resistant to disease and pests. And in the future, that's all anybody will grow is varieties that are resistant to diseases, so that once you get delivered a cleaned up clone, it stays clean. It doesn't pick it up from the environment.
Yeah, and it shows up with the microbiology lab work that shows the fingerprint, the number, the record that the plant is the plant that you're getting, which is exactly what Driscoll's does. I guarantee you the banana, raspberry, strawberry, almond, all those industries will do the same thing. The lab is an integral part of the company, because when you get your tissue culture clones, you want documented proof that those are the genetics that you're actually acquiring. I wish Ian was here today. I know that he's busy on Sundays, probably with family, but he can speak on it so well. I know Eric is a friend of Ian's as well, and Ian's just a really knowledgeable cat. I was just with him actually visiting with Skunkman Sam in Amsterdam when we were at the ICRS conference in Leiden. Chimera was there as well. That was an extremely good time. We had a good trip doing the good work of the tissue culture. So that's a company I consult for. And Sam is actually, I believe you're on the board, aren't you, Sam?
Yes, I'm bored.
I'm bored, indeed. Mike, can you hear us yet? What's going on? Cuban's gonna go rotate his dogs, or did you already do that?
Oh, I already did that. My
Damn,
wife
you're
actually
quick.
did. I went downstairs and they're already out.
She did.
And yeah, she's doing good. She's holding it down. Man, I totally forgot what it was that I was gonna say. But Farmer Tom, you have an awesome beard, bro. I just have to say, it looks good.
Dude, that's why he's one of the most beautiful people in cannabis.
Oh man, I hope my beard ends up like that one day.
Yeah, it's got good form, good fullness, and good color.
Yeah, and about that tissue culture, you're definitely right. I mean, I think the biggest issue right now with genetics, me coming from, let's say, Florida, we didn't see any of those pathogens, and moving to the West Coast, as the first time I ever saw a pathogen like that was when I took a clone in. I had a lot of genetics I popped from seeds, and I dealt with people that were also pretty private as well. They had their stuff, but those pathogens, man, things like Fusarium, I feel is a real bad one. It definitely can destroy your whole program, where you have to start over. And one of the easiest ways to bring that stuff back, I mean, you could do selective cloning and sterilizing, trying to use as many beneficials and stuff to see if potentially you can call it out, but I think that's kind of it's not the right angle. You get good selection that way, so at least your rooms are filled with clones that have vigor. But tissue culture is the only way that I've, through research, have read that you can actually take those pathogens out.
And in the case of mildew, it's not systemic. So you can't eliminate mildew with in vitro work. What you have to do is you have to grow resistant varieties.
Yeah, well, I guess the thing with tissue culture is that and we're talking meristemic micropropagation here. We're not talking about what 90% of the tissue culture world is, which is callus tissue culture, which is what they do for genetically modifying organisms. This is micropropagation, so it's still just cloning, but you're cloning just the meristem, the tiny little growth site, like a couple of millimeters or whatever, and that's what's getting put into the agar medium, and that's what's getting multiplied into 4 or 5 or 6 different clones and then cut up again. And so I guess the way Ian explained it was when the meristem is growing, it travels faster than a lot of the pathogens and microbials and fungi that are trapped in that plant. And so what happens is, especially viruses. So what you do is you end up growing the meristem, cutting it, growing the meristem, cutting it. And it's said to be after about 3 or 4 of those runs that you're like 99.9% like out of, those things will be, the majority of them will just be gone. And that's generally why they're going to figure out the fingerprint for a dozen or more of all these different viruses and pathogens and fungi, so that they can do it through the microbiology lab and then give you a clean stamp of health. So not only are they giving you the fingerprint of your plant, but they're also telling you that it's based on their company's stamp of approval, that it's not going to have these things present in it. And it's it's one thing to acquire them in a grow room, but it's another thing to be like a Cuban who comes from Florida and then gets a clone given to him, and it's just like, yeah, here, bro, here's like 10 years of pathogens and fungi and microbials I've been collecting in this impregnated plant through a multitude of vectors. Good luck with it. Let me know how it works for you. It's just like, it's so dirty and nasty. And it just reminds me of like the venereal diseases or something. It's just like, ooh, like bummer. Sorry. And Cuban, one more thing I wanted to say was that, it's one thing to have your garden decimated by these diseases and pests, but it's even almost another kick in the nuts to have so many that are present that don't even really create a lot of effects that you can see. It doesn't necessarily kill the plant. It's more like candida in a human, where it's just lowering the vigor, it's lowering the expression of cannabinoids, it's lowering the terpene expression, and it's just all around making that plant slower, budding less, you know, just attacking it in a way that's not necessarily killing it, but just making the grow like more of a break even if you're lucky than we had great success.
Yeah.
With most viruses, they are asymptomatic. You've got the virus, but all it does is reduce the health and vigor a little bit. But you don't want it, because sometimes when you have 2 or 3 viruses together, they screw the plant really bad. And if you have any pests at all, meaning bad insects, they spread them.
Yeah, the pathogen that I've had experience with, and we named it the dud. So I've been growing strains for multiple years, you know, same genetics, because I felt like you know how it is. You pop 100 seeds and you find one good strain that you put into production. Once I took that clone in, I started noticing things like the internodal growth and structure was different. The plant didn't grow in the same structure it was supposed to. It was weak. It almost felt like in between the branching and the main stalk, that I don't know what that part is called, that it almost looks like a joint. You know what I'm talking about? When you have like the stalk and the stem coming out like that little part, that would be completely not there at all. The branches would get pinched off. You'd have weed that wouldn't have any trichomes. It wouldn't have any smell. It smelled like hay. And I would plant in numbers, and I'd notice that some of my cuttings in production had it and some didn't. And this is years ago, like 4 years ago. And I just couldn't believe it. I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe I had bugs. No, I didn't have bugs. And what I realized is that by the time I realized that it was some sort of systemic problem, I had remothered using a sick cut. So one of my mothers was a dud, and that already fucked everything up, because I like to rotate my mothers. So I had to really work on, like, I don't know, like you said, 10 years of this guy's STDs. It took me like almost 4 to 5 years to completely get my dud rate at like 5%, maybe. It's not even completely gone. It's crazy. And some strains, like the one that I mothered, the dud, yeah, that plant never came back, ever. And it was like 3 years of trying to clone this piece of shit, like taking 15 cuts, taking the best one, the one that rooted the best, looked to like kind of grow the best, and it would just dud and veg and looks like a shrub, you know? And I lost hope in it, man. I just started popping seeds.
The shrub dud, aka the piece of shit.
Yeah. If you go on ICMag right now, oh sorry, on ICMag, there's a thread that's maybe 30 pages long on the dud, and it was crazy that I called it the dud, but that's exactly what it looks like. There's a lot of information, there are a lot of theories, but nobody really knows, you know. What they need to do is, I guess, send like biomass to a lab to actually have it tested to identify what it is. Would be great.
Well, to confirm that you have eliminated most diseases and virus, you need to test that after it's said to be clean, you can test it, and it is clean. It doesn't have the virus. And also, before you test it, you should test it and see it does have the virus. Because I can tell you, I've kept clones for 30 years, and I'll tell you, unless you're extremely careful, they're gonna pick up something. And the only way that you can be sure is by either only cloning mothers that don't pick up something, or or have a test like I'm talking about.
Hey, welcome back, Mike.
Thanks.
Does your shit work?
You hear me?
I can hear you, dude. Are you on your phone? Nice.
I am.
Mike's like tenacious. He's like, the first computer wouldn't work. The second computer wouldn't work. He's like, I'll try my phone. Third time's a charm. Welcome to the room, Mike West in the house. So that was fun having you here. Did you get my message on Facebook?
Yeah, totally. Cool machine. I haven't run it myself, but I've heard good things about them. So there's a ton of different ways of processing, and it goes back into what we were talking about. I guess what you guys were talking about earlier.
Hey, Mike, try to put your mic a little bit closer to your mouth. It might make the quality sound better.
How does that sound?
Well, a little bit better. It's passable. Go ahead.
Excellent. Yeah. So as Mark was kind of elucidating earlier, so a lot of the equipment that's used in the cannabis industry is used in other industries, and just because you find a piece of equipment that could be used in processing cannabis oils doesn't mean that it's a novel technology. In the same way that a broad spectrum of cannabinoids that hasn't been thoroughly researched is it's difficult to support and very, very easy to show prior art when you don't have specific ratios of cannabinoids, specific ratios of terpenoids, and then actually looking at how they're formulated, how they're processed, and then their use, right? So I've seen a lot. I spent a lot of time reading patents, and as you dive into patents, some of them you can see they're kind of relatively broad with tons of prior art, and a ton of patents are relatively specific. And those specific patents are going to be the ones that are much easier to, I guess, protect, enforce, and then much stronger to license out. Whereas a lot of the far-reaching patents are going to be more difficult. Now, the nice part is in the cannabis industry, a lot of us have taken tools and instruments from other industries and kind of utilized them or modified them for use in the cannabis industry. And as we actually scale up as an industry, you're actually going to see those factors of efficiency grow with us.
For sure. Did you get the other part of my message, the last one I sent you? He's got a look on his phone. Just in regards to what we can talk about.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so I did want to talk a little bit about this this facility that I'm involved with here on the West Coast. It's definitely kind of the dream quiver in a sense. Like for me, everyone knows me as a solventless guy, most focused on bubble hash, water extraction, dry sifting, rosin, and maybe a little bit of like terpene extraction, some vac steam distillation or something. But I was approached by a group that had this real interest in building kind of like a really great facility beyond and above just what I do, but also basically all of the options in Canada that would be allowed legally on the federal level. So CO2, cryoethanol, the isolation of crystallized CBDA and THCA, dry every type of extraction and concentrations have an interest in doing. So I called Mike up because I know that he has an extremely good background when it comes to both cryoethanol. He's been doing that for 20 years or whatever. And then CO2 as well. He's done thousands of runs of CO2s from the small ones to the big ones and everything in between. So we got to walk through the facility recently here, and it was pretty inspirational, wouldn't you say, Mike?
Yeah, beautiful facility. It's an old biomedical biotech warehouse. So it's when you look at one of the things that I see a lot is people utilizing repurposed buildings that weren't doing medical processing prior. So being able to find buildings that already have a lot of the prerequisite built out clean rooms, sterility levels, and then in that case having multiple walk-in refrigerators and freezers
Yeah, it had 3 of them, didn't it?
2 freezers and a fridge. Yeah.
2 freezers and a fridge. So just a really exciting Right. A couple of fume hoods as well. A very exciting project that possibly we're hoping that Mike is going to join us on. And we've got a whole group of different people, this incredible people. I want to mention the guys at Whistler Technologies, who have been spending the last 1.5 to 2 years designing industrialized, large scale water extractors that don't affect the end outcome of the quality. So still producing multi-screen filtrations, doing freeze drying the final product. I don't know if you guys saw on Instagram recently, I was at Whistler Medical and we were running a batch. We did a whole day, 5 hours worth or whatever, and we made 2 kilos of dried bubble hash. Just in the small unit, a 250 liter, but they also do like 500 and 1,000 liter units. So we were walking through this facility, and it's a big facility. I mean, it's 45,000 square feet, and the whole thing is going to be an extraction lab, and it was just like 2 kids in a candy store, really, just like hop, skipping and jumping through this facility. And we walked through it for 4 hours. I remember at the end of the day, I looked, and it was like thousands of, was it 10 or 15,000 steps and 8 or 9?
9 floors, and 12,000 steps.
And 9 kilometers. I walked through that facility. So it was pretty fun. It's definitely something that, I'm alluding to a lot of things because I don't want to say things I'm not allowed to say, and it's still in the very early stages, but let's just say that it's a very exciting potential project with, cryoethanol capabilities of 10,000 pounds per day, CO2 capabilities of potentially close to 1,000.
Extraction, Mark? Ethanol extraction's okay in Canada, but butane's not. Is that right?
Yeah, the one thing that they're kind of harsh on are the propane and the butane and the gas mixtures. So you're allowed cryoethanol, you're allowed CO2. Obviously, that's what the majority of companies are doing. And you know what? To get into a little bit of a CO2 conversation, because I've never been a fan of CO2, and mainly because the majority of people that are using CO2, and Mike has a better way of explaining it, and I'll let him explain it, is just that there's different ways to run the machines. And if you just run the machine like you're just going for cannabinoids, then you're obviously going to fuck with your terpene content. And often people say about CO2, oh, I just find the terpenes are just not that exciting. I'm not a big oil guy in the first place. I really just kind of smoke rosin. But, maybe you want to talk a little bit about the differences in between pulling for terps and pulling for cannabinoids with the CO2 machine, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, like with some forms of steam distillation and fractional distillation, your terpenes, different classes of terpenes are going to have different boiling points. So a lot of the times, the early generations of the CO2 extractors were designed to be able to extract the terpenes and the cannabinoids essentially all in one go. What we're seeing is that at high enough pressures, you can actually get some thermal degradation to those terpenoids. In the same way that when you do fractional distillation, the high temperatures cause thermal degradation. So, when you look at doing, there's a lot of research out there that's looking at fractional distillation of chiral compounds, which are compounds that share the same molecular weight, molecular structures, that have a differentiation in where the double bonds are located.
Those are called isomers.
Isomers, thank you. So as the cannabis industry scales up, we've seen several generations of butane extractors that have been able to kind of improve the quality of the extracts coming out of them, and we're starting to see the same thing come out of the CO2 extractors. Now that the CO2 equipment manufacturers have done several generations of instruments, they've been able to kind of dial in, what parameters work best for, whether you're extracting high terpene content material, high wax content material, or high cannabinoid content material. And then there's some cool stuff you can do with it where you can actually do some superfluid or fractionation using subcritical CO2 and then supercritical CO2. But ultimately, I think the way that you're going to want to extract your monoterpenoids, your low boiling volatiles, is going to be slightly
Well, it's exciting. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but it's definitely the quiver of all quivers. It's going to be a monster facility, and we'll see if Mike is going to join us in this adventure. But it sounds like something that could be pretty darn fun. Build where just maybe a facility that can do 5 a day. Exciting from my perspective. I'm definitely like, my whole mission is to bring the price down on hash. And I love the fact that some hash is still expensive, but it's just like, I wish it was more accessible in all the different wonderful varieties. And I just wish you could get, jars, giant pickle jars of hash rather than these little small ones. Here's a little dry sift for you, Cuban. I don't know if that's going to show that very well.
And Marcus, the water hash machines, the big giant ones you were talking about, walking through that, were they batch or continuous operation?
They can do both. You can make it a batch, or you can literally get it pretty continuous. There's little bits of breaks in the sense where the basket that holds all the material inside, like a giant 1,000-liter unit, it's got a hydraulic arm that lifts up the basket with all the plant matter and ice because it's so heavy. But you can literally have another one going right away and have that thing mixing again in minutes.
I always knew the future was continuous operation, but you have to have it so it produces the same quality or better than batch.
Absolutely. And that's not as hard with water extraction as people think. I know people were always worried about running 5-gallon batches, and then they were like, oh, I'm not getting the quality on the 20, but it's like, there's simple parameters to follow. It shouldn't affect you. The process is very simple. You're freezing the wax membranes, you're making them brittle, and then you're mixing in a way that efficiently knocks off the heads and allowing them to sink in the water and fall on the different screens. So it's a pretty simple process in the sense. I think that's why it caught on just a little over 20 years ago.
It's actually exactly the same as dry sifting, in that most dry sifting today is batch. But I'm telling you, the future will be continuous operation.
Yes, absolutely.
Current stream extraction using solvent.
What's that, Mike?
Extraction. So you can actually have like a milled flour sent through a tube with a screw, and then ethanol or solvents or CO2 sent through an opposite direction. That you can actually kind of just have essentially an auger that's constantly extracting.
Hey, I want to welcome the Dragonfly Earth Medicine crew into the room. Josh and Kelly, how's it going, guys?
Hey, guys.
Check it out. Oh, you guys muted there. You were unmuted. Now you're muted. There you go.
Big love to Green Life Productions down there in Nevada, Steve Cantwell and crew. Doing it for the Terps.
And it's nice to see you all this morning. Yay,
do you know what's so funny is I came in with this shirt and Eric is in the room right now and he's wearing the same shirt.
It's a sweet shirt. It's a sweet shirt.
Nice. Hey, Eric.
Nice one, Eric. Good to see it. Good to see it.
So you guys are mid-harvest?
We are. We're smoking out of our stalks. You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
Harvesting, it feels really good. Y'all were talking about, just different, vitalities and different plants and strains and selecting strains based off their resistance and everything. And I mean, that's really what we're doing on our farm here, and just learning as much as we can from, what the plant has to teach us. So here we are, students of the plant.
Yeah, this year we just started all seeds, a whole lot of them, ones that we've been working on for like 25 years, and adding some new strains in there and just seeing what we get up here in the north. And it's been a phenomenal year.
We're really stoked. We've been gifted seeds from the Himalayas, Himalayan Connection and Lana Creams, giving those a try. We went to Jamaica, picked up some really beautiful, seeds out of Jamaica.
Got some Moroccan strains.
We got some Moroccan Chef Shawan strains going, some Pakistani purples, and then a whole list of, headies from the West Coast. I got my select supernatural selections from Bodie. We got lots of good Bodies up here. He's awesome. We love him.
Yeah. And then all of our old outdoor seeds from, 29 years ago or something like that. And we're still trying to breed in that to get early finishers that are just super fire.
Do you remember the white grizzly, Marcus, from back in the day?
The white way back.
Yeah.
Yeah. We kept that one.
It's still around.
Crazy. Another one that I never have seen, but I remember from back then, from the Kootenays in particular, is the A1 Magenta. If you ever hear about that cultivar, drop that name to some of your old school buddies, because that's one to find. It's just like, it was so special in every way.
I'm pretty sure that came from Afghani number 1 that also threw out magenta and purple plants. I'm not sure, but I suspect.
It may very well. It was a beautiful, beautiful, like silvery purple outdoor Kootenai cultivar that was almost like coffee when you put it in a jar and closed it up, but like not quite.
I'm not hearing you. You kind of thought. Yeah, I don't know if it was our computer, but you kind of went out on that one, so we didn't hear that.
We haven't heard of that strain.
I've been a robot all day.
Was that a coast cultivar?
Kootenays.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we haven't seen that one. We've been working a lot with some hemp strains and getting some gorgeous magenta pinks and purples in there, and really trying to up our CBD game. We've been doing that for quite a few years, but we're gonna look for that magenta strain for sure. I'm gonna ask
the Holy Smokes Culture Shop guys like Paul D or Dustin or those guys would probably remember and know it, because it was through them that I saw it originally.
Yeah.
And we still see those guys all the time.
Yeah.
So.
That was like 92.
Well, that's a while ago now.
They're still doing it.
Yeah.
If the seeds you got from Morocco and from India, from the Kulu Valley and that area, if they're pure, from Morocco, they're not pure. There are no pure Moroccan land races left. They're all hybridized with Western genetics. And Manali, it's pretty much the same story. Same thing in Jamaica. They don't have pure varieties there anymore. And
it's hard.
Oh, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, we know that.
And you can see that in the genetics for sure. And I mean, when we were going around Jamaica, I mean, that was the biggest thing. I mean, it was just, they're all damn near all hybrids until you get to the seeds that are in like the food cupboard, and then you find, oh, what's this? Oh, I don't know. I got some seeds from like my auntie, or my grandma, and and this one,
then they're probably
those are the ones that are like the super lengthy.
If you find them 30 years old, then you're in luck.
Really, in Jamaica, it's like there's a main situation that you're looking for. You're looking to go hang out with some old school like Shanti or Nyabingi, like Rasta elder who's like super ital, lives in the bush, doesn't even have a house, and that guy has this sativa that's like 12 feet tall that he's growing. Those are the seeds that you want to find from Jamaica. They're so rare that finding that guy could take weeks, literally weeks of a trip of just going from one spot to another. Yeah, even multiple trips. even multiple trips if you're lucky.
Yeah, you got to earn that to get in there.
It is earned because you got to do so much driving. It is good. It's good.
Yeah, you don't need to just jump into Jamaica and get the prize. You know what I mean? It should take time.
When I did my seed collection in the 70s, it wasn't there. There wasn't. Everybody was not taking seeds everywhere. It was completely different. It had started a little bit in Mexico, but most every place else, there was no pollution. Primarily what's polluting the rest of the universe is wide-leaf drug varieties that just crank out resin by the wazoo.
Well, we tend to like those ones.
Yeah, but you don't want them in the traditional area of heirloom varieties.
I think it's the thing is it kind of is like when you're a kid and then you're not a kid anymore and you're like, oh, I want to be a kid. And it's like, no, those days are gone. It's like, that's kind of like, it's this craziness of life where it's just like these little snippets of like, wow, it'll never be like that again. Oh, wow, it'll never be like that again. Oh, wow. And it just keeps happening and going on. Yet at the same time, I feel like I'm smoking great cultivars. I feel like I'm enjoying the resin that I have, the dry sift, the bubble hash. Like I feel like things are still pretty good. I mean, even when we went to Jamaica the first time together, Sam, I can't remember what year that was. It must have been the early 2000s. Obviously, that was very deeply wide-leaf drug cultivar contaminated by then. We still made killer hash. Do you remember that shit?
Oh, absolutely. It was actually very wonderful. And there was little to no seeds at all in it. It was properly grown, and it was vastly majority what people call sativa, narrow leaf. No, I really, really liked it. And I thought mine was slightly better, but I had no trouble smoking the water hash.
Yeah, absolutely.
My dry set.
Yours was slightly better, but I would say that the fact that we made hash that was almost on point with your dry sift with a 5-gallon bag of bubble bags and some herb.
Yep, and it was a lot easier.
I still give props. Yeah, we made like an ounce of it in like 20 minutes. That's what's up. These are my memories I'll never forget. Making water hash with Skunkman Sam in Jamaica.
That's pretty awesome.
And even though the old drug cultivars are, maybe gone and the purity of the land races are gone, and we know that, we're still pulling out a lot of those, old chemotypes and phenotypes, out of those. We've got plants right now that are like easily 14 to 16 feet tall, these beautiful, lanky.
But they're like this right now.
Gorgeous. Yeah.
Just because we have to light dep them. So that means they're in a greenhouse, which means they just want to just go like that. So with our Moroccans, we definitely saw that they were hybrid. They definitely finished like outdoors here without any light, manipulation, which I wouldn't expect from, a local land race.
Morocco's fairly early, what they used to call heat. Because you got to remember, the hash industry only came to Morocco in the 60s, in the early 60s.
Well, it made good hash and it finished early. Some of the Milanas that we got there, you can see some of the hybrids, but for sure we got some that were just numbers, and they're crazy. They're just like serpents, And
I got to ask you, Sam, we had some cultivars that were specifically from, the Kulu Valley that somebody had sent us. And there's just some things that I had never seen before. And I just wanted to ask you, so when the new leaves are coming out, like the new growth are coming out, they're so thin that it almost looks like they're growing out dying. And then as soon as the leaf opens up, then it turns into a beautiful sativa leaf. But they're so like dainty. It almost looks like, whoa, what's going on with this plant? And then you realize that it was all of the cultivars that we had gotten from the same area that were doing that. Have you seen that?
Yeah, in the Himalayas, it's really common. And
okay.
Most of the cannabis cultivated in Manali, Kulu, and Parvati area around there, and even Kashmir, they imported seeds from Pakistan and Afghanistan. But the up further south, where the area you're talking about, they were Himalayan varieties, and that's what they used to rub hash. And yes, I did see what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's cool. And the Moroccan, just really dropped its leaves and just did like a crazy molting, thing towards the end. It was super interesting.
Yeah, as if the Moroccan was just like mulching itself. It went through 3 different cycles of all sun leaves, and it dropped all the sun leaves, regrew them back, dropped them, and then regrew them back. It was really amazing. And all of the seeds that we had did that.
So,
yeah, that's pretty trippy.
I've grown maybe a dozen Moroccan varieties. I never found any that I thought were truly, truly stellar. But I have really, really high critical standards.
So
terpenes, yes, but just plain brute force, not especially.
In regards to Morocco in the 60s, would that have been the Nigerian Mustafa who came with the Lebanese screening technology?
He was Algerian, but yes.
Algerian. Okay, I knew that you would know that. So that's something that people should know. I mean, props to Mustafa.
Went to the farmer who he first worked with. This was in the 60s, when all that was being grown was keef. Keef was huge. It had been there for hundreds of years, but they were not hashish producers. Mustafa said, hey, you got all this marijuana or cannabis or whatever he called it, and why don't you make hash? So he showed him how. They started making it. The first time I got to Morocco was 71, and already about 10% of the farmers were growing hash rather than just keef, because the main difference is keef is a domestic product for Morocco. Hashish means you can make cash through export.
Cashish.
And unfortunately,
Morocco
cared more about quantity than quality at the time. Now they do both.
Me and Cuban on the cashish.
And it is true, you know, we dry sifted all different types of varieties, and the Moroccan dry sift was by far amazing. I mean, wow, we weren't even doing it when it was -0, and it was just falling off in beautiful terpenes.
And it has a really light flavor, kind of an uplifting.
Limonene, beta caryophyllene, just lovely, and really light white colored, you know, dry sift. Really beautiful.
Lovely. Well, you know, growing cultivars for all that time. And I was never a fan of Moroccan. It's not until a mutual friend of Sam's and ours showed me Moroccan hash that I was actually like, what? This is Moroccan hash? It was just so melty and so beautiful. It was unbelievable. But to me, Moroccan hash has always got this sort of taste like Morocco that I guess because I didn't grow up really with access to it. We had access to Afghani, we had access to Lebanese, we had access to Indian and Nepali, which were kind of my favorites. But we never really had that Moroccan coming through where I lived. And
the best hashish in Europe is Moroccan.
My favorite hash was in high school in the early 90s in Southern Oregon, late 80s. It was called the gold-plated Black Widow hash. And it was Lebanese, super thin, light colored, and it was just like crazy smelling awesome.
Yeah, we used to get this beautiful roll of hash, and maybe Sam, you've seen this before. It was called blonde Afghani hash. And the woman who used to sell it to all of us college kids she was really old, like probably in her 70s. And she would roll it out and measure it, never weigh it. Just the measurement of it was a perfect weight. And it was in like a coil. And that was amazing. It was so cerebral. I've never seen it since.
Had it been hand sifted? It wasn't rubbed, was it? Because you don't ever see rubbed Afghan hash. It's all dry sifted there.
Yeah, you know, it definitely was hard enough that, you know, they made it into a coil, but when you cracked it off, it definitely cracked off more like a keef.
Good old hashish. I remember getting like those quarter pounds in the white little bags from Lebanon with like either red Lebanese or blonde Lebanese. I guess they cut the field early. They let the field sit a little late and you'd get different colors in the resin. But those were always nice. I felt like I was right at the end of that. You know, that was in the 80s, towards the end of the 80s. So
when I went to Morocco in 71, you could buy a kilo of medium hash for $5 a kilo.
Damn. $5 a kilo. That's amazing. That just puts a smile on my face. Let's bring back $5 kilos.
Well, I don't think any producer would like to see those prices, but yeah.
No, are you kidding me? Cuban was shaking his head. Tom was like, what are you talking about? $5 kilos? Come on, Bubble Man.
I also bought kilos of Simpsonia in the mountains in South India, Munnar. It might have been 73, 74, 75, around that time, for $3.50. Completely seedless, almost as good as the best tie you've ever had. completely different genetics and high, but incredible. $3.50 a kilo. $3.50.
Jesus Christ. I could listen to stories like that all day. Tell me more about the old school hash. Well, I used to pay a nickel. They would put it on the back of the truck.
We used to get the best stuff in Europe when I first got here was Turkish silver. It was pressed in really thin little slabs, really thin. And it was almost, when you broke it, it was like mica. You know how some really good hash, when you press the dry set or even water hash and you break it when it's a little bit cold, it'll almost chip like mica. It has almost like a faceted surface to it.
Are you kidding me? When I first started making bubble and didn't have the knowledge, and I'd have this like beautiful bubble, I'd press it up in my fingers, I'd get these hard little golden pucks, and then I go to break a piece off with my finger, and literally the thing would be so hard that it would go up under my fingernail. Like it would literally, I was jamming chunks of hash under my fingernail. And it happened a few times. It's kind of right up there with rubbing resin in your eye. You really try not to do it after you've done it a couple of times. But every once in a while, it would catch you off guard. And that bubble hash that turned like hard as a rock. But if you played with it, it would soften up. But if you were impatient and you tried to break it while playing with it, it would still be hard and literally be like whoosh, bamboo under the fingernails.
Have you ever broken a piece of mica?
Not off the top of my head, I can't think.
That's what the pioneers used to use for windows.
Those were the first greenhouse covers.
Mica greenhouse covers, hey?
Obsidian greenhouse.
The Romans used mica to create some of the first greenhouses.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
Fucking Romans, hey?
That sounds amazing. I bet you'd get some really beautiful microclimates in that. I've seen some really cool old pictures from Europe and stuff where they just build rock walls all over town, like in the Netherlands and stuff. I'm sure I've never been there, so maybe you see it when you're there. But and then they could grow peach trees all in them and stuff. And then I could only imagine with mica,
reflective mica,
or some kind of reflective thing. I mean, I would imagine that would bring out like amazing, like diffused terps and stuff that would come out from the rock. I would love to see some obsidian greenhouses in like Central Oregon, like glass buttes kind of like greenhouses. Let's work on that. Some Wally Peenies with obsidian roofs. That's what I'm talking about. That's the next pure certified.
The pioneers used mica because glass was too expensive for them. And it was hard in the old few hundred years ago to produce large flat pieces of glass. Whereas mica, you could get, at least a page of paper size mica and then, put it in a frame and make windows out of it.
Sounds really amazing. We have a lot of mica in this area around. And yeah, I don't know if I'm still on, but yeah, it would be cool to make a whole back like wall out of mica too, because it would reflect and stuff. We don't have like clear mica around here.
But lots of mica.
But that sounds really cool.
Yeah, and the stuff I'm talking about is clear. It's like used for windows, not reflection. And the pioneers used to use it because they could get it.
That's probably the good way to decide. It's accessible. We can get it. Let's use it. It's going to be my windows. From hash to mica. From mica back to hash. Anyone want to puff a little bowl? Maybe a little terp dip?
I want to offer up, I made a trip to Shashawan back in 2001 and found the hashish very nice there. Especially as compared to what was available in Tangier. And in Spain, you could find good Moroccan, but it was considerably more expensive than what the little town of Shashawan there's about 3,000 people that live inside the town. And yeah, good hashish was really easy to find back in 2001. There's my offering. Also, I want to total change of subject. I think it was Eric who's put the thought in my head that instead of calling the black market the unregulated market, he suggested that we start calling it the free market. In fact, it's what cannabis looks like when there's no regulations. And it's either the free market or the regulated market, not the black market.
I like it.
Me too.
On one level, it sounds really good to be able to do that. On another level, I just remember what, unregulated cannabis, when we first started testing it, 70% of it came up sprayed with poison.
Yeah, I'm mostly just talking about changing the languaging of it. I'm in favor of testing. As you know, for medical need, you really need to know what's in your concentrates. But just in terms of political strategy, if you will, I really want to start pushing the idea, particularly here in America. Free market is kind of a catchphrase for a lot of people in politics. And I think it's a good use of that term. Yeah, it's not the black market, it's the free market.
Yeah, you gotta have some sort of regulations, or you'll end up with some Labrador in your shit. Remember that? Someone said it in the room, so I had to say it. I should shout them out because it was Skona Vark. It's got some Labrador in it. Classic Cheech and Chong.
Labrador shit.
Exactly, Labrador shit. Yeah, I think it's got some Labrador. That's some classic, funny, ridiculous shit. I don't care who you are. You got to appreciate that. They had their place, old Cheech and Chong. They had their place.
Wade, we wanted to give you a lot of love, and we're going to be connecting with you momentarily. We got home, and we're just like, with plants and everything. But we've been definitely thinking and feeling, for you and stuff. So
yeah,
we're
so nice to see you, Wade. Really, really awesome to connect on this Sunday morning, and the rest of you as well.
Right back at you. I feel the love, and I'll look forward to hearing from you.
And I do like that free market thing. I think that it's important. I'm not saying free to do and grow however you want if it's toxic, but a free market for that's what brought it here. And it's not necessarily that regulations are going to stop people from growing crap either. It's a consciousness, and I feel like that's really important. There's so many people that are really, I've seen stepping up to the plate and bringing their cultivation practices forward and really saying, hey, this is the way that I've been doing it since, 64 or 68, and then teaching the rest of the community that way. And they came from the free market, and, they did it, with beautiful integrity from the beginning. So I really like that.
And it's kind of calling it out like it is. I mean, in this time of transformation into regulation, it's kind of like extreme takeover. It's almost like a reality show, where it's called Extreme Takeover, and they've taken over the whole entire industry with these mind-blowing regulations that just change all the time. And we talk to farms with our pure certification often. And we hear stories of years. We just talked to some beautiful people, yesterday in Mendocino, and it's taken them 3 years to get, their registration and stuff. And there's not a lot of freedom in that, it's not a lot of, but it's fine, and we'll play, and we want to be able to move forward into the future and have safety and regulations. It all is what it is, but it's interesting.
Important. I believe that it's really important. Some of us, the cannabis culture is the only culture that we have. We've lost so much of our culture. And I, identify myself as somebody who's part of the cannabis culture and part of not only that movement, but also, it's a family of people. And I believe, with the regulations and, all this corporate cannabis, a lot of that culture is going to be lost. So I think it's really important that, the free market and the elders and the people that have brought this plant forward continue with the culture, because the culture is what, has given cannabis, all of the medicinals that it has given us in our own culture, as well as our free thought. And I mean, I could go on and on with the gifts that it's given us.
Well, the culture is going to change, guaranteed. So I hear what you're saying in the sense of protecting the roots of the culture. But it's interesting too, because the culture's always been sort of like almost in a closet, really, like literally, like whether you're growing it or smoking it, like people have always, not the people on this panel, we're very out with it and very, we're the proponents and the voices of the promotion of this plant. But there's so many people that have an appreciation for this plant that are more like, don't want people to know. They haven't really grabbed the cannabis horn by the reins. They haven't really is inevitably happening, while gravitating towards these growing jobs and all these different jobs in the cannabis community and wanting to be involved, starting their own brands, et cetera, et cetera. It's almost like the immigrant, patriot argument, like where you have your person who's from that country, but then they're like, they don't want immigrants coming to their country because they took our jobs. And it's the same sort of thing with this cannabis industry, that you have all these new people. And, the cannabis industry for the whole time I've been involved has been like, let us be normal. Let us be normal. Let us just be a part of all the other systems. Let this just happen. Let this not, like, don't stop kicking our doors in, stop taking our kids away. Just let this happen. And then all of a sudden they listened and it was like, okay, let it happen. We're going to let it happen. And now they do it the way they do everything, which is overregulate it and control it and fucking tax it. And now people are like, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing this. Well, it's attracting a whole different group on one side. I hate the regulations. I hate, I like that consumers are protected via certain regulations. I think treating cannabis like plutonium with biometric scanners to get into vaults that are 3 foot thick is absurd and ridiculous. And cannabis doesn't need to be, people don't need to be protected from cannabis. Therefore, like a simple fence and a security system is more than enough. It shouldn't have to be treated like plutonium. But the main point on what I was saying was, now with our community, the way, we had this roots community. I almost feel like if you were back in the day at the old cannabis cups in Amsterdam, like that was originally what I kind of knew as the cannabis community, the core cannabis community. I knew there were many other groups all around the world that connected to that group. Not everyone could make it, but that was this group. And they met every year. They flew from all over the world and they came and they congregated and they met and they smoked and they, created together. Now you have this whole other group of people that aren't from necessarily that culture. They're from all these other different cultures, and they're coming in much like it's a Canada, in the sense that everyone's welcome. It's like, yeah, it's the cannabis plant. Like, of course you're welcome. Pick it up, do something great with it. Like bring something new to the people, grow great cannabis, make great extracts. And you have so many people involved that it's hard for the people who are at the core of it for so many years to not feel threatened by what's happening, because suddenly, your private game has become very public. And everyone can play. And it was a lot easier. And I'll say this in a sense that, the smaller the number of people, the easier to compete is. When you bring in like large numbers, it's like, woo, the exponential difficulties of that, when suddenly people who you're like, they may have not been doing it for the last 25 years, but maybe they're plant biologists or agriculture students, and they come in and absolutely just crush it. I've seen it. I've seen people that have never made hash in their life take the bags, put their own herb that they grew into the bags, and come out with basically hash on anyone's level, like what I call the nicest hash basically that you can make in the world, whether it's some Skunkman Sam hash or some CubanGrower or whoever. It's as nice as it gets. Once you get to that level, it's as nice as it gets. And that's
it's true. I mean, I think that what you're saying is really, it is sort of true. And, you can look at it as the cannabis culture is worldwide. No matter where you go in the world, you can find people, and they may not look like you and they may not speak the same language as you, but you still have this love and this sharing of cannabis. And I believe that that's also part of the cannabis culture. It is worldwide. It's a love of cannabis. It doesn't mean that you have to cultivate the cannabis. It doesn't mean that you have to grow it or make hash or be around it all the time. It's a love for it, and it's a true respect for it. And when I talk about, the culture of cannabis, it's a respect for cannabis. And I do believe that there are corporate entities that do maybe have an unbelievable respect for cannabis. But I think when I talk about the culture of cannabis, it's the respect for it, not necessarily being a part of, you know, a group of people or a certain group of people.
And you can't live in the past, in the sense like, you know, it's never going to be what it was, you know, and maybe we can look at it like, I remember now. I remember what it was like now in 2018, you know, and maybe in like 2028, like who the hell knows what we're looking at then. So I mean, that's part of like the enjoy the journey. And like, here we are, you know, we have these crazy regulations. It's kind of like harsh, but you know, part of our peer certification and the group of farmers that we're working with, you know, we've worked really hard to keep a quality from that generation before and all of our ancestors, to keep that quality moving forward, you know, within this new regulated market is extremely important to us. And, you know, big love to, you know, the pure farmers out there that are doing amazing work.
And also I think that people who are a part of the culture have a responsibility to help teach the people who are just stepping into the industry, you know, how to have respect. Everybody's invited. It's not exclusionary. If you love cannabis, you can be part of the cannabis culture. And I think that it's up to us to really share what it has meant for us to be a part of the free market and to bring the respectful part of cannabis forward.
And we would like to, you know, give special love to Heart Rock Mountain, who just came on, and they're really amazing, and check them out online. I mean, they're 50 years of cultivation with the whole family there, and they're in Mendocino, and they're, you know, moving forward in this new paradigm, keeping family alive, keeping culture alive, keeping this cannabis alive, breeding, moving forward. And I'm really stoked to see this group grow and be a part of this future. And so it's not just a pharmaceutical style.
It's funny because
Absolutely.
when I think of the free market, I think of Oregon, where the prices are so cheap, it almost is for free in the market.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. No Oregon farmer was laughing at that humor.
I have a question for Sam. How long do you think, how many generations or years do you think it would take for an acclimatized cultivar to become a land race in a place like Humboldt County or British Columbia? I mean, these land races, obviously, part of their stability is for maybe thousands of years. The plants were just breeding amongst themselves right in an area, and the ones that were flourishing were the ones that did well in that environment. This is something you've talked about before, Sam. I just wonder how many generations would it take for a stabilized seed line that was acclimatized in a climate area that was widely spread to become a land race? How would that work?
What has to happen is there has to be enough generations that any of the more off or different ends of the gene pool are basically more eliminated, and what you have left are slight variations of the same song, and that can take, you know, thousands of years, or it can be done actually in a few hundred, probably in a decade, by people with human selection, if they pay very close attention to the plants and import materials into that area which are consistent with the environmental conditions there.
I just noticed
there's no set amount. It's really up to the specific area. For example, if you want stuff to grow up in Alaska and become a land race there, I would say good luck and lean towards really, really early varieties to do it with.
I just noticed that Sam has a Apex vaporizer on his lap from Bird. The Bird is the word.
Yeah. And if you look really, really close at his face, at Sam's face, he's totally spaced out on it.
Guy looks baked. Oh, God, I'm exhausted. Tired.
I wanted to bring up some cool stuff that I guess is popping on Instagram with the rosin, the sauce. I don't know if you've seen that. Uh, Diet Funk put it out there, and I started seeing a lot of. I don't produce much anymore. You know, I make head stash here and there, but the people that are producing, I get to see what they're doing, and they're effectively separating the terp layer from the THC without a second press, using like a jar and creating a head pressure with just the terpenes and slight heat, and over time it'll separate. And some people are getting like pretty awesome uh, crystal formations that are more than just like what the applesauce was with the BHO. And
Some diamonds.
I think it's wonderful. It's just like one step closer to what non-solvent can do versus hydrocarbon. Like I thought that maybe the pinnacle of a oil extraction was being able to separate and create like that sauce with that a lot of the BHO guys was making. But to see high quality 90 micron being pressed out and then that being separated and looking like it's getting close to that level, to me, I think that's excellent. And I don't know what your thoughts were on it. I know that you've been pressing a lot of rosin.
Well, the only thing that I would be concerned about is, does it lower the terpene content of what you're smoking? If you're only smoking the diamonds or the pearls or the caviar or whatever you call it that's crystallizing out, does that mean that the terpenes are a free liquid and you're not consuming the terpenes in the same ratio as it came in the herb or when you press the resin?
Those THCA diamonds usually typically have between 5 to 10% terpenes in them, so they're infused with terpenes, just dripping with them. And yeah, you definitely get a full entourage effect for sure.
From my observation,
Mark, if you're pressing that and you're getting 10 grams of THC and 1 gram or 2 grams of terpenes when you press it, and then it separates out, that means there's now less terpene in the ratio than there was when it started.
No denying it. Sam, you would like it. And I think so. Now terpenes back on the THCA and smoke it. I think it looks beautiful and it's pretty cool. And I've smoked it, and it's definitely different. It's not the exact same. The one thing I would say is, and Mark, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but although it's a solventless thing, it is still using hydrocarbons to produce that effect, which is the terpenes within the profile that's creating that separation. Correct?
Well,
okay, go ahead.
No, sorry, man. Go ahead.
I was just going to say with butane, so the key to sauce production or trying to get that is, first of all, using fresh frozen material. So you can't normally make live resin, or you can't normally make it from live resin. The live resin is typically always from fresh material, and fresh material just has a huger load of terpenes. And so the key thing, I think, in crystal growth is that a non-polar environment is always the best environment to have when you're trying to grow crystals like THCA. And so certainly as the butane boils off, what you're concentrating now is the terpenes, and recognize that each individual variety of cannabis is going to have a different terpene profile. So each one is different. And so not all strains of cannabis are going to be ones that when you start getting the crystallization, it's basically going to be completely solvated by the THCA is going to be completely solvated, so you won't get crystallization. Or in other terpene profiles where the terpene profile is dominated by more nonpolar terpenes, you are going to start seeing crystallization, the so-called diamonds, right? But those diamonds, those THCA crystals are just thoroughly and completely perfused with terpenes. So there's no mistake about it. It's not just crystalline white vanilla THCA that they're getting out. And I just wanted to comment that my experience has always been with butane extraction, Cuban. So I'm hearing about this method for the first time. So I don't know about this pressing and using the terpene head pressure, I think is what you said, to fractionate the sauce from the diamonds. But certainly the one thing that I've seen before is absolutely pristine and pure THCA by NMR analysis with no other impurities in there that's derived from a second pressing. That's what we use to hydrogenate to make this batch of HHCA in Chris Barone's lab. So we looked at that material by NMR, and it was absolutely pristine and pure. And again, I was the one who was very much skeptical that you could make THCA solid, but what you find in the hang up in the rosin bags, and everyone has seen this now, is that white crystalline material which people were throwing away for years has been THCA solid, right? I don't think it's funny. I just think it's like how this whole thing has evolved, right? From when we first started talking about pressing rosin here on Hash Church, and evolved to, now it's been sophisticated enough that we can actually really get a reasonable production yield on pressing, like you say, either sift or flour itself to make rosin for the market. That would, again, rival that of a butane, solvent extract.
Did you want to go ahead, Cuban?
Yeah. So, sorry, I hear myself, Mark. All right, cool. So the way that with BHO, they use the pressure from not only the butane but also the terpenes in a sealed container. So it creates a positive pressure, and this positive pressure, and when you break that surface tension in the oil, what it does over time is it promotes the THCA to begin to crystallize if the beginning product is pure, minimum on waxes and things like that. It'll begin to crystallize, and then the terpene fraction will separate. So it never the beginning starting material does not necessarily change because it's trapped. So what you get after it's done is kind of like a pressure release. You may get some smell, but it's small. I wouldn't say maybe not even 0.1 or 0.2 of a gram that I think you would lose in this process. And this is from working alongside with somebody that produces quite a bit of oil and seeing this process. I always thought that would be a crazy method for rosin, but because I didn't quite understand how to create that fraction, or because rosin waxes so fast that you don't get that liquid layer. But these guys have been able to achieve just that by pressing out their high quality hash. My friend just made it with some 45, but a lot of these guys are pressing 90 micron first wash. They're getting this oil, they're flash heating it to go past the wax phase and back to a liquid phase in a sealed container. They'll put it back to about 90 degrees, and they'll leave it for about 2 to 3 days. And over time, without any agitation on this rosin, it will begin to crystallize the THCA just like it does with BHO, but not at that degree where some of these guys are getting like 4 carat diamonds.
Yeah. How big are the crystals? Are they long, or just small little like nodule crystals?
Man, some people are everyone's doing it like reaching different degrees of crystallization. Some are getting elongated crystals, they have the facets and everything. Others are getting like a nice sauce consistency where they're getting small, kind of like micro diamonds, but the fraction's so liquidy that it looks insane. It looks really cool. So All Greens is doing it really nice. All Greens Extraction, they have a nice Instagram and they're sharing information.
Are they posting data too? Are they showing data to these things?
The one that I think would be closest to show data would for sure be All Greens, because they have a dispensary in Colorado, and they do a lot of in-house production. And I'm sure that we can probably get him to do some testing because he's one in the forefront of that technique, I would say. But the one that released that's doing a lot of knowledge dropping is Diet Funk on Instagram. But it's totally sweet. So terpenes, Skunk Man, they don't necessarily escape in the rosin. So when you take a dab, you can't just get just crystals unless you strain the crystals and the terp fraction and separate it willingly. If not, regardless, those crystals are saturated in terpenes, like literally dripping off of those crystals. And the smell and the taste is amazing. I think it doesn't lose any flavor at all. You could tell when it starts to lose the terpenes because the consistency changes. It kind of dries out a little bit. But as long as you keep it sealed, the terpenes have nowhere to go with the proper liner, I guess.
What kind of yield are they getting? Do you know, Cuban?
I don't know, but we can go ahead and check. I recently tried to do it with some strawberry banana. I got great results, but I put so much rosin in a 4-ounce ball jar that I blew 2 lids because of the pressure that was accumulating in the jar. Like tightly sealed, and it kind of warped the lid out.
Terps.
Yeah, seriously, dude. If you had a chamber and you were able to like maybe pressurize it with nitrogen, you might get like faster results. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's again where the downfall may be, and ultimately some of these methods which are using ball jars, which just aren't meant for these kinds of pressures. I mean, these things are meant for canning vegetables and fruits and stuff like that, and certainly can take some pressure because in that process, you know, in the canning process, you generate some pressure. But certainly that's an area where I believe in Denver now, there's been Denver, Colorado, this would be. The fire department's issued some edict about using ball jars for doing that incubation of sauce. And there are a couple companies that are now providing so-called sauce pots, which are basically just stainless steel vessels that have pressure regulation on top and a way that you could vent pressure. And certainly the way that these things look like cannons that are, you know, over, you know, engineered for pressures way higher than you would generate. But what you're talking about here is an alternative method to make similar concentrate without having to deal with those kinds of safety issues. If you're talking about using butane, which as it off gases, it does create pressure.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what the terps are doing in the jar, which are also hydrocarbons.
Right. It's all, right.
The terpenes.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Cuban. No, you go ahead.
I mean, a ball jar, you're right. It's not the right thing to do. Now, I'm making this with my rosin press at home. You know, I don't have a lab, but if I did, I would get with a fabricator, get a vessel made. And that vessel, not only would it be able to hold 4 times the pressure of a ball jar safely, but I feel like pressure and the purity of the product is what will achieve those like bigger THCA formations, or at least can separate the terp fraction completely, even if those crystals aren't huge, but it'll be completely separated. I've seen some samples of BHO sauce that has been made under pressure in a vessel, and the terp fraction is completely liquidy. It's no comparison looking at something that is using just the head pressure of the terpenes and the butane versus something that's been pressurized, and it's a big difference. And I feel like that in rosin will also make a big difference, but I don't think anyone's tried that yet.
And does the rosin or the extract or whatever it is that you're starting with to make crystals, if it's under pressure, does it produce a higher yield of crystals or a faster yield?
It could essentially produce both. I've heard claims where, like for example, on BHO, for it to crystallize, they put it in its liquid state, not a shatter. They don't allow it to dry to that state, and it could take under its own pressure that it creates in a sealed container about 5 days. But there are people that say that within 48 hours in a pressurized vessel that they get that complete separation of the THCA crystals and the terp fraction. I believe the yield, no matter, is the same. At the end, maybe the higher pressure will create more yield because they get that even more separation. The less THCA in the terp fraction, the more liquidy it is. But more in that realm, what they're focused on, because they're so beyond that already, is the size of the crystal, how clean the crystal is, the clarity of the crystal. So they're like in their own zone. But I think we're getting in the beginning steps of where they were 6 months ago, or 9 months ago with rosin. which is cool.
Can you get crystals that are yellow or red, or in other words, THC, when it's absolutely pure and not broken down at all, it's as clear as water. And when THC, as like an oil, an alcohol extract or something, it slowly starts turning yellow, then it ends up more like a dark red. If there's no impurities like chlorophyll and any of that kind of stuff. And can people make crystals with color?
So the crystals, the that I've seen as a pure example of THCA is a clear crystal. When the crystal is has impurities, the crystal will then be yellow, perhaps in its pure form from fresh frozen, not cured material. We're talking material that's never been dried. What changes mostly with the size of the resin between an amber head, a clear head, or cloudy head is the color of the terp fraction. A terp fraction on an amber, like a 70 or a 45, the terp fraction will be more amber, but the diamonds will still be clear. If you use a 90 or 120, then you'll have like a really almost like liquid clear terp fraction, maybe slightly yellow, but the diamonds regardless will be the same. You may get a higher yield of diamonds per gram using a 90 or a 120 versus a 45. But maybe with age, if you leave this product out and cure it, potentially the color of the diamond can change, because THC, I mean, naturally ends up turning into almost red with time.
It does turn red. I've got resin heads, which I just kept aside for like a year on the open shelf. And within a year or a year and a half at the most, they were really red.
Well, I remember the dry sift from Michael that was like
12-year-old.
It was 12, 13 years old when I first saw it. I think 16 or 17 years old when I last saw it.
Red as fuck.
Yeah, and when it melted into this like reddish, dark black obsidian, like just oil. It was definitely no terps left. Welcome back, Mike. You have something you want to say about this sauce?
Yeah, so Mark could probably talk about this, but I would assume that general trend of coloration is going to be oxygen binding to not only your cannabinoids, but all the terpenoids that occur in your sauce.
Flavonoids, too. Flavonoids are really highly colored, and they're very prone to oxidizing in air, and they'll oxidize if you stare cross-eyed at them. They're that unstable, and so just even on the rotovap, what comes out as a clear extract will start to turn yellow as you concentrate it. And the other thing I've seen, again, just putting stuff on the shelf, certain terpenes, when you isolate them first, have basically little to no color if you're isolating them under vacuum or if you're isolating them by some type of distillation process. As soon as they come in contact with air, they start darkening up right away. So I think there's, again, some, oxidative instability with some isolated terpene fractions that perhaps are kept protected by the cannabinoids in the plant itself, because remember, the cannabinoids themselves are phenolic in nature, and phenols are antioxidants. So perhaps when they're in the plant, the cannabinoids act as a photoprotectant or a protectant from oxidation of the terpenes. But when the terpenes are isolated and no longer, intermingled with the antioxidant capability.
And the phospholipid bilayer on the trichromic head is going to reduce the amount of oxygen that's actually entering the trichromic gland, right?
Right. And isn't that the whole nature of timing harvest based on resin gland color? And I think, right, when we had Mel Frank on a number of episodes ago, I can't exactly remember how this came up in conversation, but I think one of the things that I took from Mel Frank's original text was the timing of harvest and how it's very important to be able to recognize the change in color of those glands as to try to guess when you're going to get maximum potency. And I think there is some delicate balance of chemistry that's happening there. The highly colored things, I think, are flavonoids, because it only takes a little bit of those flavonoids to color a whole lot of material, because again, most of the terpenes, when you isolate them on their own, will be clear liquids, but some of them will start immediately turning color, and I don't exactly know what's happening there, but I've seen it happen in front of my eyes.
Excuse me. You want to go first, or should I? Well, you're frozen, so I'll go. The first time I got pure THC, 100% pure THC, was I think in 2000.
or THC?
It was THC. I think it was THC. Yes. Because
okay, it wasn't a solid; it was liquid, right?
Yes, it was an absolutely clear liquid. It had the texture of a sort of runny epoxy glue, and it had absolutely zero taste, zero smell. If you put a tiny drop on your tongue, it tasted like absolutely nothing. I think it was THC because it had been synthesized from CBD. And I think just that processing would have converted it to THC. But I'm not 100% sure. But
yeah, that's
when
right.
I opened the vial, it was in a little ampule, a glass ampule with a gram in it. And it was packed in an inert gas. And it had been kept frozen until it was given to me. I opened it, and I stuck a little thin piece of toothpick or something in it just to see what the texture was like, and so I could taste it on my tongue. And what I found out was that within a few minutes, where I had stuck the toothpick into the THC, it left an ultraviolet trail through the THC, which started turning yellowish and eventually reddish. But yeah, when I saw that, it blew my mind.
Man, that would have been a great macro photograph.
Moral of the story is pack your extracts in nitrogen.
Yep, and don't poke your extracts with toothpicks.
Well, the moral of the story is pack them in small enough vials that you can finish them off when you open them.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. I like it. Well, it's an interesting conversation. I'm pretty sure Soil Grown's been doing that for a while, if I'm not mistaken. Correct, Cuban?
Well, what he achieved is similar. He does a double press and then will liquefy the THCA fraction that's retained in the bag.
Right.
And he actually he has steps that I don't want to talk about because we're friends, man. He's a cool guy. Actually,
yeah, he's great.
Very much. But we kick tech and shit when I see him in person, and I don't want to put his stuff out there that he doesn't talk about. But his process is nice too. He gets a nice terp fraction. His THCA is also pure, but he does a two-step process. And although it's achieving a very similar end product, this is done with a one-step process. So it's a different technique. I talked to him about it when I was down in LA. So I bet in the last 3 weeks, he's probably been on that for sure.
Right. Okay. No, I thought he was also doing the other one as well. I could be mistaken. I've invited him in, but he's busy today, so I'm gonna have to get him on next week maybe and further the conversation, because it's nice to get together with you guys and gals and talk hash and cannabis and just spend a couple hours on a Sunday morning chilling out.
When I did that with the pure THC, I was absolutely convinced that THC would have a smell and a taste. I put it on my tongue. I couldn't tell even. I could tell there was, some gooey stuff on my tongue. But I mean, I'm so used to all cannabinoids I had ever had that were concentrated being really, really like pepper on my tongue.
Right.
Because they always had terpenes, which is where the pepper was coming from.
Sure. Beta-caryophyllene. Terps. I do it for the terps.
I have
Please
a question.
ask it.
Sam or Mark, maybe you can help me out with this. But something and actually, Marcus, you and I talked about it, or all of us did when we were in Whistler, last week together.
And happy birthday to your wonderful son.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's a little buddy.
He's the dude.
He's so the dude. Marcus has the dude. But I have a question about CBG. And, it's something that no matter what strain that people are giving us, our numbers in CBG are coming up really high. And then the cultivars that we've been working with for a really long time come up even higher in CBG. And then people will give us, a seed, and then they'll say, oh, it doesn't have any CBG in it. Well, we're growing it and it has CBG. So I'm just wondering about like a cultivated version of CBG coming up, in the plant, or a possible genetic CBG.
What
it seems to be, it's just a question for me. I was wondering if you guys had an idea.
We developed CBG varieties that were well over 10%.
And that's in the you're finding.
What's that?
Are you finding CBG 10% in the flower?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yes, we started with varieties that are 1 or 2%, and then through selective classical breeding, we brought them up to over 10.
We created a strain called Zelly's Gift, and Green Life Productions just sent us the Do It for the Terps family there. Did a lab test, and they got theirs back, and it was a 10.3, I want to say, was what it was on CBG.
And it just seems to be just wondering about genetic versions of CBG. Is it different?
Did the lab work?
I think it was probably Digilabs.
Digilabs.
So CBG is oftentimes shown in plants early in flower. Plants produce enzymes that actually not only bind terpenes into the precursor cannabinoids. CBG is one of those precursor cannabinoids, CBGA. The breeding that's been kind of going on, developing those higher CBG cultivars, is actually delaying the production of CBDA and THCA synthase, which is the enzyme that converts CBGA to either CBDA or THCA. So if you take those cultivars that are showing 8 to 10% CBG, in an additional 4 weeks, you'll actually see that CBG number decrease, and either your THC or CBD numbers start to trend upwards.
Well, it depends what synthases they have. If all they have is a CBG synthase and they don't have functional THC or CBD synthases, you don't see THC or CBD. They have to have the functional synthase to produce the end compound from CBG.
So do you all believe that the cultivation practices or the way that the plant is being cultivated can even raise CBG in possible genetics that don't have it?
I'd be surprised. I've heard people say that they, I picked it early and the CBG is higher because it hasn't converted to THC or CBD yet. I don't think that's true at all. It's not what we saw, and we did. I mean, the work we did was, more than 15 years ago, and we're the ones who wrote the papers on the inheritance of CBD and the other cannabinoids.
Yeah, I think the question that she asked is, can you introduce an environmental stimulus to the plant to upregulate the expression of the synthase that's either not being, present at the right level? Because yes, CBGA is not a N pathway precursor, or it's not an N. It's not the end of the cannabinoid biosynthetic pathway, right?
If the other synthases aren't there, it is the end.
No. So the other synthases are there. They're just not expressed at the level that they need to.
No, they be non-functional. Skunk has CBD synthases, but they're non-functional.
Yes, but okay. So so the question has to be asked at the genetic level: is there something that can upregulate the expression of that enzyme? And that's something that,
exactly.
Without the proper synthases, it won't. But if you have the proper synthases, maybe it can tweak it a bit, yes. but you need the synthases. You can't, you know,
The
turn
proper
CBD.
synthases are there, Sam. That's the point.
No, they're not. They're not. You're mistaken. Listen, you're a chemist. I'm a plant breeder, and we should stick to what we're good at.
Okay.
So I know that
I
I've
mean, no,
seen
be honest.
cultivars
If
of
the synthesis is
CBD.
non-functional, it's there. You're technically right, but it's non-functional.
So I know I've seen a couple of cultivars of CBD that have been cultivated along the West Coast. And what one of the LED companies I was researching was claiming, with not enough supporting documentation, but they were saying that their spectrum was improving the CBD scores because of the higher presence of red spectrum light. There's some research papers looking at shifting towards the red spectrum in cannabis can produce more of the CBD A synthase and less of the THC A synthase. But I think that's manipulating light spectrum for producing specific cannabinoid profiles hasn't been done on a large enough scale to actually quantify and show it.
Approach. What you want to do is you want to breed with high expression of the synthase of the target you're after. Moving environmental conditions is, small potatoes compared to the big potato.
Yeah, I totally agree. It all has to start with the genetics. And if you have the genetics, then having those environmental conditions to maximize it will kind of help your, genetic selection.
I just got 20 kilos of French variety, Synthetica 70, because it's reported to have small amounts of CBG. So I picked up 750,000 seeds of it so I could screen a few thousand. That's an industrial hemp variety.
With all your experience, Sam, and testing all the cannabinoids, I mean, is it really just the cannabinoids that we're looking at on the tests that are really of note on a medicinal level? I just want to believe that out of the 100 cannabinoids that are there, that there's just so much more to the story. I feel like I'm at like the beginning of this like amazing book or story, and I just want to hear the rest of it.
I feel like we're growing for cannabinoids we don't know yet.
And I would just be interested to know about how,
here's what you can
styles and how just growing.
What you can say for sure is that people wouldn't know that yet because there are varieties with high THC. There always have been. There are now varieties of high CBD. I produced the first one that was over 10%, but that was more than 20 years ago. So there are CBD, and now people have varieties which I think are approaching 30% CBD in a plant. So, and we did the same thing with CBC. We did it with CBG. We did it with the propyl homologs of THC, CBD. So THCV, CBDV, CBCV, and now I forgot what I was talking about.
And how about this? What else?
What about CBN? That's something that we've been finding a lot of.
CBN is not directly produced by the plants. It's a degradation product of primarily THC.
Mm-hmm.
The plant does not
have you seen grow techniques enhance any cannabinoids?
Also does not have a delta 8 synthase.
Any lavender grower can tell you that terroir is going to affect your terpenes, and affecting your terpenes are going to change the effect of the cannabinoid strains.
That's true because the right terpenes can both, and a lot of them modulate the effects of the cannabinoids. Correct.
And by building more diverse soils that have, more and more and more microorganisms, I just know and I've seen through testing, and I want to see more, and through the family, is just how much more diverse it can get. And I really look forward to the day when we can get, deeper into the story.
And much like our cultivars of our land races, we've lost our land race soils as well. We've lost that incredible biodiversity in our soils in the same way that our land races have been lost, So we're really trying to bring that back and create more and more diversity in hopes that it will create more cannabinoids and terpenes.
Soil and lights and other environmental conditions can certainly affect ratios, but you're not going to get a new cannabinoid with different light or different soil or different air or different water. You have to have the synthase to be able to produce that cannabinoid.
Oh yeah, I totally understand that. I'm thinking more along the lines of just information about new ones that we just haven't heard about, because there's not like a list of all 100 cannabinoids and all their.
Yes, sir.
Well, I would like to see, I should probably, learn more about that then. It's just not common through testing with recreational farms, to get those numbers.
And you got to remember that some of the cannabinoids listed, like Delta 8, that's listed as a cannabinoid. It's not produced by the plant directly. There's not a synthase for it. Most people agree, Meshulam and Dr. Asole and several other, Roger Pertry, they say that it's a degradation product of lab analysis.
And I guess I'm just saying, I guess I wish that the labs gave us more information to where we could use that and access that information, so where we could put the two together.
What's that, Sam?
They may not know the answers. The labs, they're doing the best they can, but if they don't have the knowledge, then they certainly can't share it.
Yeah, a lot of the terpene, if you look at soil microbiology, there are soil microbes that produce a lot of the precursors to terpenoids in the soil. So having biodynamic soils provides those precursors.
It will certainly increase the amount of terpenes that you get. Absolutely, I've seen that myself many, many, many times. But whether it will create a new terpene that you have never had expressed before, that, I have a lot of doubts about.
Now, with the variation in indigenous microorganisms, I'd have to assume that the microorganisms in Afghanistan versus Morocco are going to have a different ratio of different microorganisms. Would that then kind of, I guess, different ratios of microorganisms producing different ratios of terpene precursors are going to probably slightly affect the terpene expression based on your local region?
Well, that's easy enough to find out. All you do is you grow the same clone in Afghanistan soil, and you grow it in California soil, Kansas soil, Alaska soil, et cetera, et cetera. And if all that's changing is the amounts of the terpenes found and not new terpenes or different terpenes, then the answer is no.
May I share one thing I've learned is that you can vary the cannabinoid ratio, the amount of CBD to THC, by varying when you harvest the plant. What I've found for a number of high CBD cultivars is if you want the maximum amount of CBD and the minimum amount of THC, you would harvest when your trichomes are still clear and a good portion of them have gone milky. Whereas if you wait till most of them are milky and a good portion of them are amber, the CBD levels tend to go down and the THC comes up. And so you end up creating what was a 30-to-1 if it was harvested while trichomes were still clear. It turns into a 4-to-1 if you wait till they're amber.
I haven't seen that much of an extreme difference. But I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I've seen it myself in my lab for years.
Yeah, I
And
know a
we've
lot of the hemp
noticed-
farms are harvesting early just to prevent that bioaccumulation of the THC.
Nice. We've even noticed that temperature changes, being greenhouse growers that we are, the maturity can change overnight. It's incredible. We'll be looking at, the heads, they'll be maybe crystal clear, and then we have a really cold night, and then they all turn amber within hours. So temperature really seems to be a big part of it as well.
It's also very dependent on varieties. Sometimes some varieties, cold temperatures speed them up. Other ones, it slows them down.
Well, great conversation today so far, guys. I mean, it's been 3 hours. We've been rocking it out. We started on a depressing topic with the fires, and but we always got to cover things, maybe even if we don't necessarily think they're super positive. And we got into a little hash conversation. Cuban's blasted out, but he was able to share a little of that solventless sauce with us and that tech. So you guys got those good Instagram accounts that if you want to go follow, I think All Greens Extraction was one and Diet Funk was another. And Cuban put a couple other ones. I'm sure he'll shout them out on his Instagram or whatnot. But yeah, I don't know. I think 3 hours is pretty solid. I'm sure the Dragonfly Earth Medicine crew has much work to go do. Am I correct?
We do. Yeah, we do. We've had minimal sleep lately, and yeah.
And we're thankful for it.
And we are. I mean, the harvest this year has been unbelievable. That means food, fruit, all the apples are coming on at the same time. We've got the kids in there canning. We're out here clipping. It's all happening, and we are just so incredibly thankful. And we're really thankful for this day to be with you all.
Partially because of the higher general temperatures this last few months?
Well, we've had a combination of high temperatures and then not so high temperatures, only because it's been so, and atmospherically smoky in most of British Columbia. So it can be as nice as it wants to outside, but if you don't see the sun, it's not actually been that warm. I mean, it's been pretty stagnant in a lot of ways too with the wind. There's been like really kind of minimal wind and stuff. We usually have a really good clear of wind and stuff. So, other than that, it's just the naturalness of just this time of year, and we're starting to get colder nights, so that the plants are maturing and they're coming in. And it's beautiful.
Yep.
Well, definitely give a hug to Sky and Sierra, and you guys take care up there in the Coots off Kootenai Lake. What a beautiful
and
lake.
big love to you guys during this birthday time.
And everyone
Yes.
else on the parade, and Mark and Sam and Tom and everyone.
So nice to see you guys.
Left.
Really
Everyone
made our day.
that was here. We appreciate the conversation.
Hey, I just wanted to recall the last time we saw each other, which we were texting about. It was it was my first time going to the Emerald Cup this year, and Josh and Kelly said, "Look for the teepee. Look for the teepee. The teepee will stand out. There's only one teepee there at the Emerald Cup, and certainly right after the gate where you get in and you get your card to go medicate, there is the teepee." And so I found the teepee before I found the innards of the Emerald Cup. I was hanging out with our friends Josh and Kelly. And Josh, I don't know if you remember, but you gave me a Canagar. Remember that Canagar you gave me?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so I brought that to Delfest this year, which is a bluegrass festival that I go to in Western Maryland. And during Del McCurry Band's Saturday night set, we smoked that in front of the band, and they were looking down saying, "Oh my God, look at that thing. Is it a cigar? Is it a joint? What the hell is that?" That thing burned for an hour long. I shit you not. That Canagar was the coolest gift I think I've ever gotten by anyone.
Well, there'll be more coming to you for sure.
Give thanks to Kush Kirk on that one, Brandon, and everything.
Yeah.
And that was.
And we'll
that's
be
beautiful.
rolling up
Yeah.
some this year for sure. We'll be bringing them out.
Yeah, that was cool. That thing had a fuse to it and everything. That was like real deal.
Yeah, well, we can't wait to giggle with you in the teepee this year for sure.
Yeah, well, it's the first thing I'm gonna look for. The hell with everything else. Where's the teepee? Get me to the teepee.
Exactly. Exactly. It's the entrance. It's the we clear the space. It's the spiritual cleansing as you come in and everything. So
right. Well, do tell Trixie that I said hello. Pass on a Grateful Dead hello and everything to our friends out at the Grateful Dead family that you guys hang out with. And
absolutely, we will let him know. We'll be seeing him really soon.
Definitely.
And we were just with him last week, so
and
for
we'll
sure.
be spending a lot of time. Well,
awesome.
too.
I know Annabelle is a big enthusiast, and I think that they're doing some great things. I don't want to say any things I'm not supposed to say, but there'll be announcements later. Those guys are getting involved in a big way.
Well, they are. I mean, look for Mountain Girl Botanica.
Yeah, we gotta get Mountain Girl on the show. I promised her when Hash Church came back.
She's all about it.
Yeah,
we gotta make that happen.
She'll come on and she can tell the story, of her new company and everything that's coming. It's really exciting, and there is a charged up group in Eugene, Oregon. That's and that's really kind of coming together to make things happen there. So
nice.
We're really thankful.
We'll all be in
them.
the teepee this year. We're gonna have like a whole special area for everybody to be able to show their products.
Those are my people. My people are in the teepee.
Nice.
Does anybody know the date?
Emerald?
Yes.
Don't even want to guess.
What? I'm sorry. What did you say?
The date for the
of
Emerald
the
Cup.
Emerald Cup this year.
It's the second weekend in December. That I know. I think it's the 13th and 14th of December.
Yes.
I was close.
Yeah. And it would be great for you to come, Sam. Be great to see you there.
Tim has invited me every year, and I still have never been to one because
it's great. It's a great feeling one. There's a lot of good vibes there. People with really great information, and it's just sort of the sharing of the tribes from all over the globe. It's just a really high event.
It looks like a good one. I would like to make it one day if I could ever get back down into the US of A. But we'll see.
I thought you were straightening that all up, Mark, so that you could go.
Yeah, but now they're giving lifetime bans to people who cross the border from Canada who don't even smoke, all they did was invest in a cannabis company, and they're like, boom, lifetime ban.
I suppose that they invested.
Right.
I hope to see you guys at the Emerald Cup. I put in a speaker workshop proposal, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, much love. I'm going to sign off. Thank you, all of you, for everything. Much love.
Hey, thanks for coming out, Wade. I wanted to thank you as well as Skunkman Sam and Dr. Scialdone, as well as Farmer Tom. Honestly, thanks. And thanks, Eric, who was in earlier as under the name Bridget. That was a good one. Mike West, who was also in a while ago, and CubanGrower. So everyone, if I forgot anyone, sorry. I just, it's been a long conversation this morning of interesting, I learned some things. I got to be a part of the conversation in a way, and it was just, as always, a real pleasure. So thanks everyone for coming out. Maybe we'll talk to you next week. Peace out.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.